Hi everyone. Tonight, we ease into a place where the cold makes itself known before any explanation can catch up, where your breath clouds the air before your thoughts fully settle, and where it becomes clear very quickly that attempting this in real life would likely end badly. You stand at the edge of the Rocky Mountains as daylight fades, snow already brushing softly against your boots, your fingers growing stiff even though the wind has only just begun to stir. Before settling in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy the content here. And while you're getting comfortable, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now lower the lights and allow the world to soften as you move forward into the dusk. You climb the slope slowly. Each step produces a muted crunch of ice that carries quietly between the scattered pine trees. The air feels sharp, almost metallic, and you sense that familiar sting inside your nose that only comes with deep winter cold. You pull your coat tighter, not because it adds much warmth, but because the motion itself feels reassuring in a place that seems intent on wearing you down. Behind you, the trail is already fading beneath drifting snow, as though the mountain is trying to erase any sign that you were ever here. When you stop, you listen. The wind moves through the branches with a sound so gentle it feels nearly asleep. In that pause, you picture yourself as one of the early trappers, the men who crossed these slopes for months at a time, choosing isolation and hardship in exchange for pelts and solitude. A well-known historical fact comes to mind. By the early 1800s, the fur trade in the Rockies had become valuable enough that hundreds of men traveled these regions each season, sometimes in small groups, often alone. Yet despite their numbers, nighttime remained their greatest challenge. You move farther into the trees, letting your eyes adjust as the light continues to fade. The landscape narrows into shades of blue and dark gray. What first felt like scenic cold now feels deliberate, almost targeted. You rub your hands together and notice the faint burning sensation that signals your skin is losing warmth. It makes you wonder what those mountain men actually slept on, and how they avoided freezing when temperatures dropped far below zero. Historians still debate whether the hardships described in their stories were exaggerated for effect, or if reality was even worse than what was written down. You pass between two large pines, their low branches spreading outward like arms meant to shield you. The needles carry a sweet, resin-like scent, and for a moment you think you smell smoke, though there's no fire nearby. Perhaps it's only a memory carried on the air. The ground here is uneven, but the trees reduce the wind to a thin whistle instead of a sharp blow. You stop and kneel, brushing away the top layer of snow. Beneath it, the earth is hard and frozen, colder than the air above it. It becomes immediately clear that lying directly on this ground would drain your body heat within minutes. Early trappers learned this lesson quickly, and some never survived long enough to learn it twice. You recall an unusual detail from an old account. Several journals mention that overconfident newcomers slept directly on the snow their first night, trusting their heavy coats to protect them. Many woke up numb, shaking violently, sometimes unable to speak at all. You stand, adjust your pack, and continue uphill. Your breath forms soft clouds, and the steady crunch of your boots against the icy surface becomes a rhythm, almost like a heartbeat in the empty wilderness. The Rockies stretch out ahead in broad, rolling walls. In the fading light, the peaks appear both impressive and deeply unforgiving. You can almost see the trappers who once walked here before you, pressing paths into the snow with their own tired steps. Then the temperature drops suddenly, the kind of sharp change that feels as if the mountain itself is breathing cold into your bones. You clench your jaw and pick up your pace, hoping movement will bring warmth. It helps very little. You rub your arms, trying to force blood back toward the surface. The cold here does not bargain. It simply exists and expects you to endure it. As twilight deepens, you push through a dense stand of spruce. The darkness between the trees is thick enough that you occasionally reach out to steady yourself against a trunk. The bark is rough, ridged with frozen sap. You run your fingers along it and imagine trappers leaning against these same trees, resting their legs, letting the cold serve as proof that they were still alive. You straighten, shift your pack again, and continue climbing. Your breath clouds the air, and the crunch of your boots settles back into that steady, familiar rhythm. The mountains loom ahead once more, vast and severe. In the low light, they remain both beautiful and merciless. You can easily imagine those trappers ahead of you, shaping the route with each step. Some nights, the only rest they managed came from brief periods of sleep while sitting upright, because lying down meant too much exposure to the cold. You keep moving until the trees thin slightly and the horizon shows the final trace of daylight. You head toward that dim glow. Though it offers no warmth, the snow beneath your boots grows deeper and softer, almost like stepping into feathers. It slows your pace, but not enough to frustrate you. Strangely, the snow feels comforting, quieting the world and softening every sound. You reach the top of a small rise, and the land opens into a still clearing. Above you, the sky takes on the color of cooling embers, streaked with the last hints of orange light. You inhale slowly. The air enters your lungs like icy water. You exhale and watch your breath drift upward before disappearing. In this open space, you picture a trapper making camp. A simple bed of branches, a small fire, a buffalo robe draped loosely over his shoulders. Just enough warmth to hold on to until morning. That image settles heavily as you stand there, the cold steadily working its way into your gloves, your boots, and the spaces behind your knees where warmth briefly lingers but never stays. You adjust your pack again and move closer to the center of the clearing. The snow here is untouched and smooth. You crouch and scoop up a handful, noticing how light and dry it feels. This powdery snow would be easy to clear away, easy to prepare for a sleeping place. You let it fall through your fingers like dust. High above, a bird calls out, sharp and brief. The sound startles you, cutting cleanly through the silence. You watch a dark shape cross the dim sky before fading into shadow. That lone cry brings to mind the trappers who spent entire winters in these mountains, seeing little more than birds, tracks, and the occasional distant column of smoke. Survival came down to small choices. Where to walk, where to rest, where to shelter from a cold capable of ending a life after just one poorly planned night. You stand, brushing snow from your gloves, and take a deep breath. Already, your legs feel heavy under the weight of the cold. You picture the mountain men pushing through the same kind of fatigue night after night, driven by trade, necessity, and something deeper that is harder to explain. Perhaps it was adventure, perhaps stubborn resolve, perhaps simple hunger. The clearing darkens further. The cold closes in. You take another step into the gathering night, prepared to learn how to sleep in a place that seems determined to keep you awake forever. You cross the clearing and angle toward the darker treeline ahead, allowing the cold to guide your judgment, just as it once guided the mountain men. The wind has shifted. At first it is faint, almost like a curious touch along the back of your neck. Soon, though, you sense it sharpening as it flows down from the higher ridges. You quickly understand that tonight, as with the trappers before you, one of the first priorities is finding a windbreak. Without shelter from the wind, no amount of fur or fire can provide real rest. You pull your coat closer and study the terrain. With this new awareness settling deep within you, you move carefully, each step sinking into the snow with a soft hiss. Ahead, the forest appears as a wall of dark forms. As you approach, the shapes become clearer. Fallen logs, tight clusters of spruce, boulders half buried in drifts. You tilt your head and listen again. Behind you, the wind funnels through the clearing in a long, low whistle. Under the trees, however, that sound breaks apart and weakens. It feels as if the land itself is quietly pointing out where sleep is possible and where it is not. Early mountain men learned quickly that choosing the wrong place to rest could turn an ordinary night into a dangerous one. A well-known historical detail comes to mind as you examine the trees. Trappers often camped on the leeward side of ridges because moving air pulls heat from the body far faster than snow or even rain. Cold wind strips warmth much more efficiently than still air, and in the Rockies, those gusts can be unrelenting. You feel a hint of that now as a sudden draft curls around your ankles, slipping beneath your coat like a restless animal. You move farther between two thick pines. Their branches hang low and heavy, pressing close to the ground. The needles carry a sharp, clean scent, a small reminder that the mountain offers moments of comfort amid its challenges. You push aside a branch and step into a shallow hollow beneath the drooping canopy. Here, the snow is thinner and the air noticeably calmer. You release a slow breath and watch it rise without scattering. This spot reminds you of something a trapper once wrote in a winter journal, a small detail that stayed with you. He claimed he chose sleeping places by squatting down and imagining himself as a rabbit, considering where a creature that avoids drafts would settle. He favored low areas surrounded by dense branches. Historians still debate whether this rabbit test was serious advice or frontier humor, but the idea fits men who survived by watching animals closely and copying their behavior. You crouch as those trappers once did, lowering yourself until your boots crunch against packed snow beneath the pine. You run a gloved hand along the ground and notice how little the air moves. Overhead, the needles form a loose but effective cover. Snow clings to them in pale clumps, dimming the surroundings like a natural lampshade. Everything feels quieter here, as if even sound slows down under the canopy. You stand and walk a short circle around the tree, checking for risks. A broken branch angles downward in a way that could cause trouble. You push it aside and snap it off cleanly. The crack echoes briefly up the trunk before fading. You toss the branch away and hear it land softly in a drift. You realize that these small tasks, not dramatic struggles or intense hunts, were what filled the evenings of mountain men. Minor adjustments that decided whether they rested or battled the cold until dawn. You step out of the pine hollow and continue searching for an even stronger windbreak. The forest thickens, then opens around a few small clearings. You notice a fallen log lying diagonally across a shallow dip. Its exposed roots rise from the ground like the ribs of something long buried. As you move closer, you sense how the log disrupts the wind. A gentle stillness lingers behind it. Snow rests lightly in this pocket, untouched by the air that continues to move above. You step into the hollow and feel the wind vanish almost instantly. You close your eyes briefly and appreciate the relief. In a place like this, a trapper could unroll a bed or pile boughs without worrying about the wind stealing his warmth. You kneel and brush snow from the log, revealing dark, frozen bark. A faint scent of old wood rises, earthy and cold. You imagine a man decades earlier making the same motion after a long day trapping beaver in icy streams, hands stiff, shoulders sore, craving the simple comfort of still air. You stand and follow the curve of the fallen tree with your eyes. The log has settled solidly into the ground, with little chance of shifting. The depression behind it would support a bed well. You test the spot by stepping behind the trunk and lowering yourself until you sit with your back against the curved wood. The log blocks the wind completely. Only a faint breeze passes over the top and drifts down gently, barely noticeable. As you sit, you reflect on how mountain men related to the land. Many developed an almost instinctive ability to read terrain. They spotted windbreaks without effort, recognizing protective hollows as easily as others recognize road signs. You recall another note from a trapper's account. He observed that wolves and elk often rested in places that seemed illogical to newcomers. You again picture a man from long ago repeating this same routine after hours in freezing water, muscles aching, hands numb, seeking nothing more than calm air. You stand and once more trace the settled shape of the fallen tree. It remains firm, unlikely to roll. The hollow behind it still offers a natural cradle for rest. You sit back against the trunk again, noting how effectively it shields you. Only the lightest movement of air brushes the top, hardly felt. You think again about the mountain men and their deep understanding of the landscape. Their ability to interpret subtle features bordered on the extraordinary. They noticed what others missed. Another trapper once wrote that wolves and elk often chose resting spots that confused inexperienced travelers. Yet those places, when studied carefully, were protected by slight angles of rock or dense clusters of trees. Mountain men watched these animals closely and learned from them. They often placed more trust in the signs of wildlife than in their own instincts. The light thins. Snow keeps falling. You breathe out slowly, allowing the final trace of daylight to slip away behind closed eyes as you settle deeper into the shelter, preparing to learn the next requirement for staying alive in these harsh mountains. You remain tucked into the quiet pocket behind the fallen log for a moment longer, giving your eyes time to adjust to the fading twilight. Before long, another understanding settles in, heavier than the chill itself. A windbreak can shield you from the strongest gusts, but without fire, this protected spot will turn into solid ice by midnight. You rise carefully, stiff joints protesting, and sweep snow from your coat. Trappers learned this reality long before you ever arrived. Without a reliable fire, even the strongest mountain man held only a weak grasp on survival. You step out from behind the log and feel the wind brush across your face. It has grown steadier, purposeful, as if reminding you that comfort here never lasts and is always conditional. You pause to select a small clearing just a few steps away. It is close enough to benefit from the windbreak, yet open enough for a fire to breathe without being smothered by drifting snow. You kneel and clear a rough circle in the powder. The snow is dry, giving off a faint squeak as you move it aside. Beneath it, the ground is firm, frozen, unyielding. You scan the area for fuel, and the weight of the task already settles into your shoulders. Fire means warmth, safety, light, a quiet presence in the dark. But it also means effort. It always has. Even the earliest mountain man journals note how much of each evening disappeared into collecting wood before the cold intensified. A well-known historical detail from the fur trade era surfaces in your thoughts. You lean back into the shallow hollow again, letting your mind wander to those who traveled these mountains before you. Some nights they slept comfortably, warmed by fire and hides. Other nights they shook through every hour, thankful simply to survive until morning. The windbreak was their first line of defense, a silent barrier that softened an otherwise unforgiving world. You move between trees, tapping low branches with a gloved hand. Some twigs snap cleanly, ideal for kindling. Others bend and sag, heavy with moisture. You discard the wet ones and keep the dry, tucking them into the bend of your arm. After gathering a modest bundle, you search for thicker fuel. Near the edge of the clearing, a deadfall lies partly buried, its pale branches exposed. You grip one and pull. It breaks loose with a dull crack, releasing a small cloud of dust from its decayed core. The scent is earthy, slightly sweet. You carry your collection back to the cleared patch and crouch again. The wind toys with the edges of your pile, lifting thin twigs before setting them down again with quiet impatience. You press your hand to the frozen ground, steadying yourself, reminding yourself to move deliberately. Mountain men often kept their fires low and controlled, both to conserve scarce fuel and to avoid drawing attention. A curious detail you once read returns to mind. Some trappers believed that a large nighttime fire invited trouble, not only from people but also from animals, especially mountain lions drawn to warmth and movement. Whether this belief came from experience or superstition is still debated by historians, but it gives you pause before building anything too bright. You arrange your smallest sticks into a loose nest, careful to leave space between them. Air must move freely. At the center, you place thin strips of bark, peeled earlier from a fallen limb where they stayed dry. You settle them gently among the kindling. Around you, the world has grown quiet except for the wind whispering through higher branches. Snow drifts down in delicate flakes, each catching a final glimmer of light before resting on your gloves. You brush them away and reach for your tinder. Your fingers search your pockets for something soft and fibrous, ready to take a spark. Mountain men used whatever they had, dried grass, shredded bark, even scraps of rope. You take the material you prepared earlier and tease it apart until it forms a light, fluffy bundle. You crouch lower, using your body to shield the setup from the wind. A spark flashes, then vanishes. Another brief flare. A thin ribbon of smoke curls upward, trembling in the cold air. You lean in and blow gently, your breath steady and warm. The tinder begins to glow, faint and watchful, like a half-open eye. You blow again, controlled and patient. The glow strengthens, spreading outward until a small flame finally appears, fragile but persistent. It catches the bark, then climbs toward the twigs above. Relief moves quietly through your chest. The fire offers little heat yet, but warmth is on its way. You add a few more thin sticks, watching as they ignite, their edges curling into soft orange lines. A quiet crackle follows, subtle but reassuring. You place a thicker branch at an angle, allowing the flames to travel upward. The scent of burning pine drifts through the clearing, mixing with the sharp smell of snow and a faint metallic note. It is a reminder of how cold the surrounding world remains despite this small source of warmth. You sit back on your heels and hold your hands over the rising heat, appreciating the first signs of comfort. Your fingers tingle as feeling returns. You glance at the trees around you, their branches slowly shedding coats of powder. The fire paints a dim amber circle across the snow, a small pocket of light cut from the darkness. You picture yourself as one of the trappers after a long day crossing frozen ravines. For them, fire was the closest thing to companionship. Many wrote by firelight, hands shaking from cold, ink freezing if the flames faded too quickly. You shift one of the thicker branches and hear the fire respond with a soft hiss. Your shoulders loosen slightly. Still, full relaxation is impossible. You remember how mountain men watched their fires through the night, not constantly, but often enough to keep embers alive and prevent sparks from spreading. A stray ember could land in dry needles, and one careless moment could send flames toward a bedroll. Some even claimed that winter winds could extinguish a fire without warning, a point scholars continue to question. You continue to watch the flames as they strengthen slowly. The fire remains modest, nothing excessive, just enough to warm your hands and offer light. Shadows move at the edge of the clearing. The windbreak behind you curves gently, blocking the worst of the gusts and letting the fire do its quiet work. As the heat builds, a subtle comfort spreads through your chest. Cold still clings to your feet and wrists, but your core begins to relax. You stretch your fingers again, moving them closer to the warmth, appreciating the relief. You scoop up a handful of snow and hold it near the fire until it softens slightly, then press it to your lips. The cold water sharpens your senses, a brief return of clarity. You remain seated for a time, listening to the quiet crackle of the fire, sensing its warmth reach you in soft, steady waves. It is easy to picture a trapper from 200 years ago doing much the same, boots gently steaming, eyes heavy with fatigue, allowing the fire to ease him toward the edge of sleep. He may have been alone, or perhaps facing a companion across the flames, both wrapped in thick garments, sharing a silence that was neither uncomfortable nor emotional, simply functional and necessary. Above you, the sky fully darkens. Stars appear in scattered points of light. The forest settles into tall, stretched shadows. Snow reflects the firelight faintly, its surface broken by shifting patterns. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls once, its low sound moving through the trees as a quiet signal that night has fully taken hold. You place another branch onto the fire and watch as the flames slowly claim it. The warmth grows slightly stronger, just enough to soften the edges of your focus. You inhale deeply, cold air filling your lungs, then exhale slowly, letting your shoulders relax. The fire is stable. The night has settled in. Around you, the steady rhythm of survival moves quietly. The wind may roar above, but within this small circle of light, you begin to understand how mountain men endured the cold, one night at a time. You step away from the fire with the clear understanding that your next task matters as much as heat itself. You need a surface to sleep on, something that keeps your body raised above the frozen ground. As soon as you move beyond the firelight, the cold presses back against your boots, as if to remind you of its authority. Mountain men knew that the ground at night was often more dangerous than the air. It drains heat silently and without pause, pulling warmth away until even the strongest traveler wakes shivering. You walk toward a small stand of pine trees, their branches arching outward like open arms. Thick layers of needles cover the ground beneath them. Still, you know loose needles alone will not provide enough protection. What you need are fresh boughs, still rich with resin and flexibility, capable of trapping air and creating insulation, much like a mattress holds comfort. You kneel beneath a low branch and run your fingers along the smooth needles. They feel cool, yet alive, leaving a faint sticky residue on your gloves. As you inspect the tree, a familiar historical detail comes to mind. Many trappers in the Rocky Mountains slept on beds made of spruce or fir, since these evergreens remained flexible even in extreme cold, offering natural padding that prevented bodies from sinking into frozen soil. This simple method of layering branches protected countless travelers from frostbite long before modern sleeping gear existed. You carefully remove several boughs, taking care not to harm the inner growth, and gather them in your arm. Nearby, another tree droops under the weight of snow. You brush it aside and pull gently on a branch. It resists briefly before snapping free cleanly. As you collect more limbs, you recall an unusual anecdote from a trapper's journal you once read. He claimed the softest beds came from trees struck by lightning, suggesting the wood felt warmer, as though it retained a trace of that energy. Whether he believed this literally or simply enjoyed storytelling remains unclear. Some modern researchers still debate the claim, noting that charred wood can hold heat differently, though not enough to offer real benefit. Still, the idea lingers, adding a quiet sense of mystery to the surrounding trees. Once you have gathered a sufficient bundle, you head back toward the fire. Snow crunches beneath your boots, each step leaving wide tracks like those of a slow-moving animal. You place the branches beside your windbreak and shake the snow from your gloves. Your breath drifts into the air in pale clouds. The fire continues to burn steadily, its golden light dancing across the snow. You kneel at your chosen spot and begin arranging the boughs with careful intention. First, you lay the thicker branches in a loose crisscross pattern. The needles brush against your coat with a soft, whispering sound. You weave thinner pieces through them, building a flexible layer that lifts several inches off the ground. As you work, the scent of crushed pine fills the air, sharp yet reassuring. It blends with the smoke from the fire, creating a smell that feels both natural and calming. You press your hand into the bedding. It compresses slightly, then rebounds. Tiny pockets of air form beneath your palm, insulating you from the frozen earth. Mountain men depended on this natural barrier. Without it, heat loss could occur several times faster, even under heavy furs. One early explorer described the winter ground as if it were alive with cold, constantly pulling warmth downward. Historians still debate whether he exaggerated or simply struggled to describe the intensity of ground frost. Regardless, the danger was real. You continue adjusting the boughs, pulling at one side, smoothing another. The wind brushes your back, but it no longer feels threatening. You have formed a small refuge within the larger wilderness. When you step onto the bed to test it, your weight settles into the branches with a soft crunch. It is uneven, but noticeably warmer than bare ground. You sit briefly, letting your legs rest, sensing the faint warmth rising as the boughs trap your body heat. A light breeze moves through the treetops, shaking loose snow that drifts downward like slow-falling stars, melting as it reaches the edge of the fire's warmth. You reach out and adjust a few more branches, tightening the weave and raising the head slightly where your shoulders will lie. The design is simple, yet highly effective. Trappers mastered the use of whatever was available, building beds in minutes rather than hours, guided by instincts shaped through countless nights outdoors. As you sit on your improvised mattress, another idea surfaces from a book on frontier survival you once read. It suggested some mountain men believed sleeping above certain routes calmed dreams and reduced restless movement. No scientific explanation was offered, and the belief remains a frontier superstition that researchers view with mild curiosity. Perhaps the root beds simply provided better comfort, or perhaps the belief itself brought peace of mind. In extreme cold, even small comforts carry weight. You stand once more, brushing pine needles from your clothing. The bed is finished, prepared for the long night ahead. You return to the fire and kneel, warming your hands. The flames hiss quietly as a log shifts, sending small sparks upward that fade into the darkness. You breathe slowly and deeply, allowing the warmth to spread through your chest. The cold still surrounds you, resting at your shoulders, your knees, the edges of your boots, but it no longer feels overwhelming. You have created a place of ease in an environment where ease is rarely found. You glance once more at the pine bough bed, its interlaced surface forming a pattern of green and shadow. It appears simple, yet welcoming. You lift another bough and lay it carefully across the top, smoothing it into place like a coverlet. The forest stirs quietly around you. Darkness settles deeper. Your fire releases gentle pulses of warmth, each one brushing your face with calm assurance. You stand again, brushing away loose needles. The bed is finished now, prepared for the long hours ahead. You kneel beside the fire once more, holding your hands out to the heat. The flames murmur as a log shifts in the coals, sending sparks upward in small spirals that disappear into the night. You inhale slowly, deeply, allowing the warmth to fill your chest. For a moment, you stand still, letting everything settle. Then you ease yourself down onto the pine boughs, feeling them support your weight. A soft, resinous scent rises as your body warms the branches. The night air seems calmer now, quieter, as if recognizing the effort you have made. This is how mountain men slept through countless nights, depending not on luxury, but on knowledge, instinct, and cooperation with the land. A plain bed of branches, a protective log, a nearby fire. Small elements of survival arranged with care. You close your eyes briefly, letting the fire's warmth touch your cheeks. The forest seems to shift around you. You are no longer merely passing through. You are part of this place, resting as the old trappers once did, trusting the simple, clever bed beneath you to last through the cold. What you need next is insulation. The kind mountain men relied on winter after winter. Buffalo robes, elk hides, deer skins, layers of fur that turned sleeping in the Rockies from misery into something barely tolerable. You rise, brushing needles from your coat, and step toward your pack. The night has grown darker, the sky a wide sheet of black marked with scattered stars. Cold air bites at your face as you search through what a trapper might have carried. Mountain men seldom traveled without at least one heavy robe, and a familiar detail from fur trade accounts comes to mind. Hunters often described buffalo hides as the warmest bedding a wanderer could own. Properly tanned and thick with winter fur, a single robe could weigh more than 50 pounds, yet offer unmatched protection. Even in extreme cold, someone wrapped tightly within it could retain heat long after the fire faded. You unfold an imagined hide in your hands, feeling the dense fur brush against your gloves. It is heavy, awkward, but comforting in its solidity. You spread it across your pine bough mattress, the fur catching firelight in dull golden tones. The robe settles over the branches like a dark, warming wave. You press your hand into it and feel warmth begin to gather as your palm sinks into the thick fibers. As you smooth the hide into place, a curious memory surfaces. Something you once read in a frontier journal that always lingered with you. One trapper claimed the finest sleeping hides were taken from wolves that had taken them from other wolves. He wrote that a wolf pelt shaped by nature's fiercest hunters carried a kind of mountain magic, warmer than anything prepared by human hands. Whether he meant it humorously or sincerely is unclear, and modern readers still puzzle over the remark. Perhaps it says more about his personality than frontier practice. Still, the idea adds a quiet charm to the task of arranging furs in the cold. You position the buffalo robe so its thickest edge faces the windbreak. You tuck one side beneath the boughs, forming a small barrier against creeping drafts. The fire crackles as you work, sparks lifting lazily before fading. Warmth brushes your face, then slips away when the wind shifts. It is a reminder that these hides are more than comfort. They are essential. Kneeling beside the bedding, you think about how mountain men layered their coverings. Deer or elk skins underneath for softness, heavier bison robes above for insulation, sometimes an extra layer of fox or coyote fur across the shoulders. One seasoned frontiersman wrote that a traveler could sleep warmly in almost any cold if he carried enough layers of hide. In the same letter, he admitted that hauling them felt like carrying half the wilderness on his back. Modern historians debate whether this was exaggeration or the honest complaint of a man burdened by too many winters under too many furs. Regardless, the lesson remains clear. Layers mattered. You test the bed by lowering your weight into it. The hide resists slightly, then surrounds you with slow, steady warmth. The pine boughs bend gently beneath, and the trapped air between layers begins its quiet work. You slide your fingers through the fur, noting the dense undercoat beneath the rough outer hairs. It is not luxury by modern standards, but out here, luxury is defined differently. Anything that keeps heat from escaping becomes invaluable. Behind you, the fire snaps, sending a small ember skimming across the snow. It hisses and vanishes. You glance back, understanding that this fire, comforting as it is, cannot last all night. The hides must finish the job. You pull the robe higher at the back, forming a shallow pocket for your shoulders. You imagine a trapper making the same adjustment after a day pushing through chest-deep snow, traps frozen solid in narrow streams. The exhaustion must have been overwhelming. Yet this routine of bedding offered a moment of order in an unpredictable world. You sit at the edge of your bed and draw your coat closer around your chest. Your breath rises in slow clouds, twisting faintly in the firelight. The wind shifts again, rippling the fur. You press your fingers into it, anchoring yourself in its warmth. It feels almost alive, carrying the memory of the animal it once was. Another belief from old trapping records comes to mind. Some frontiersmen claimed sleeping beneath bear hides led to more intense dreams, as if the animal's spirit lingered through the night. Others believed certain furs kept bad dreams away entirely. Folklorists still debate whether these ideas were true superstition or simply stories born from long, lonely nights with only fire for company. Either way, they show how deeply these men connected with nature, even in sleep. You lie back fully once more, letting your body settle into the layered bedding. Warmth spreads slowly across your back and shoulders. The pine boughs support you just enough to keep the frozen ground at a distance. The fire's weak glow paints the scene in copper tones and shadow. The forest hums quietly, its nighttime rhythm steady and calm. You draw one edge of the robe over yourself, feeling its weight rest securely across your chest. It is a weight that promises endurance, a weight mountain men valued even when it made every journey heavier. As the cold moves in slow currents around you, the hide becomes a small, contained world inside a far harsher one. You close your eyes for a moment, allowing the warmth to gather. Wind slips through the trees, touching your face with a cool, steady presence. The fire shifts once more, casting a soft wash of light across your bedding. Wrapped in fur, resting on pine, guarded by fire. You begin to see why mountain men relied on these layers as if they were trusted companions through the night. The world beyond remains frozen, wide, and indifferent. Yet within this narrow space, warmth grows steadily, calm and enduring. You make one final adjustment to the robe, pulling it firmly around your shoulder. The night feels quieter now, more familiar. The mountains have not softened, but they seem to tolerate your presence for the time being. You draw in the scent of pine and smoke and allow the warmth to settle around you. You shift carefully beneath the buffalo robe and turn your head toward the faint glimmer of starlight reflecting off a frozen riverbed. Even from this distance, you hear the light, brittle sound of ice shifting as the current moves beneath its surface. The noise is sharp yet oddly musical, a reminder that water never truly rests, even in extreme cold. You rise slowly from your bedding, moving with intention as the weight of the hide slips from your shoulders. The fire still burns steadily behind you, but the cold reaches your skin as soon as you leave its glow. You head toward the riverbank, drawn by the pale light playing across the ice. Mountain men often chose camps near water not for comfort, but out of necessity. Historical accounts widely agree that trappers depended on rivers for travel and fresh water. Although icy banks were among the coldest places to sleep, water provided food, direction, and survival. It also brought danger. Your boots crunch through the snow, each step echoing softly across the still landscape. The trees thin near the river, opening onto a stretch where moonlight spreads freely over the frozen surface. The air here feels sharper, as if the river releases cold more intensely than the wind itself. You kneel near the edge and press a gloved hand against the ice. It creaks faintly under the pressure, a quiet warning. Snow along the bank lies in smooth layers, broken only by the light tracks of a fox winding upstream. You follow the trail briefly, letting your thoughts drift as mountain men once did, always reading signs of life in their surroundings. You imagine a trapper kneeling here, drawing water from a small opening in the ice, breath steaming as he listened to the low groan of the river beneath him. As you straighten, a memory surfaces from something you once read in an old trapping journal. One frontiersman claimed that sleeping too close to fast-moving water caused unsettling dreams, believing the river's voice entered the sleeper's thoughts. He wrote that it whispered of unseen creatures beneath the ice. Later readers wondered whether he suffered mild hypothermia or simply had a poetic mind. No clear answer exists today, but the idea stays with you as you listen to the icy murmurs beneath your boots. You step back from the fragile edge and walk along the curve of the river, searching for a place where a camp could be set safely, neither too close nor too exposed. Mountain men learned this balance through experience. They needed water for drinking, cooking, and traps, but resting directly beside it often meant enduring the coldest night possible. Cold air settles downward, collecting in low ground, and river valleys gather it like a basin. You spot a small rise along the bank and climb onto it. From this position, the river rests just below, shining under the moon. You inhale deeply, the cold air biting your lungs. Pulling your coat tighter, you survey the area. This elevated ground feels safer, warmer by a small but noticeable amount. It offers distance from the river's chill while keeping its steady sound within reach. A stand of spruce trees rises behind you, their branches creaking softly. You step closer and rest a hand against one trunk, feeling the frozen bark through your glove. Many trappers preferred camps near rivers because animals often followed these paths, leaving fresh tracks by morning. Over time, this became common practice, though some modern historians question whether it truly provided an advantage or simply became tradition. The records leave space for debate, and researchers continue to examine the issue with interest. You crouch again near the rise, imagining how a mountain man would prepare his bedding here. Pine boughs laid down first, then the heavy robe, angled slightly away from the river to reduce exposure. The fire would be placed far enough from the water to avoid sudden gusts, yet close enough for its light to reflect off the ice, creating the impression of added warmth. You can almost see that reflected glow now, a small orange twin flickering on the frozen surface. You walk toward a nearby drift and scoop up a handful of fine snow. The crystals shine briefly in your palm before melting into cold droplets. You rub them between your fingers, watching the moisture cling to your glove and freeze again. Everything here moves at winter's pace. Slow, quiet, persistent. A breeze passes over the river, humming low as it schemes the ice. It tugs lightly at your coat and slides through the trees. The cold near the river feels different from that on higher ground. It is heavier, flatter, as if it wants to settle around your feet and rise upward. You turn back toward the fire, understanding why mountain men approached rivers with both reliance and caution. They were essential but unforgiving. As you move away, the forest seems to release a breath, welcoming you with softer air. The fire crackles as you return, sending warmth across your legs. You lower yourself near your bedding and glance once more toward the river's pale glow in the distance. Its sound remains steady, a slow, icy rhythm threading through the night. You settle onto the buffalo robe, its weight resting comfortably across your shoulders. The pine boughs beneath shift slightly as they adjust to you. The fire burns warmly, casting amber light over your surroundings. You feel its comfort again, steady and grounding. Sleeping near water was always a calculated risk for mountain men, a trade between convenience and cold. Over time, they learn the behavior of rivers, observing how wind, ice, and terrain shape the night. You sense a small connection to that quiet understanding. As you sink deeper into the bedding, the distant river becomes a gentle reminder that life continues even beneath frozen surfaces. You breathe in pine and smoke as the night settles around you with calm persistence. You ease yourself upright on the pine boughs, feeling the lingering warmth of the buffalo robe before the cold edges back in. The fire now burns low, glowing red rather than flaring as it did earlier. Its steady heat reminds you that knowledge mattered as much as skill to the trappers. Much of what they knew came not from written guides, but from listening at trading posts, gathering small pieces of hard-earned advice shared by those who had survived long enough to pass it on. You step closer to the fire and gently stir the embers with a stick. Sparks rise briefly in small spirals, then disappear into the darkness. The air goes quiet for a brief moment, and that pause draws your thoughts toward memories of trading posts spread along the frontier. These locations served as centers for stories, cautions, and hard-earned guidance. Historians often point out that the summer rendezvous gatherings functioned as a kind of school for trappers. Not a school with benches or written lessons, but one where every exchange carried knowledge shaped by brutal winters. A simple hand motion explaining how to set a trap. A low-spoken confession about an error that nearly ended a life. A warning about valleys where snow settled deepest. You imagine stepping inside one of those posts. The door creaks open. The scent of smoke and animal hides fills the space. Men lean over rough tables, swapping accounts of frozen nights. Someone mentions that if boots froze while you slept, it was better to warm them against your chest instead of near the fire, since rapid heat could split the leather. Another voice adds that sleeping too close to your pack attracted rodents, eager to chew through fabric for warmth. You picture yourself resting against a wooden beam, taking in every piece of their experience. A faint smile forms as you recall an unusual bit of advice written in an old journal. One trapper claimed that rubbing the inside of a buffalo robe with small sprigs of sagebrush kept the fur soft and improved warmth while sleeping. Whether he stumbled upon this by chance or believed the sage held protective power is unclear. Later collectors who reviewed his journal debated whether the note reflected frontier practice or simple belief. Even now, the idea feels both curious and practical in a world where small comforts mattered greatly. You step toward a nearby pine and run your fingers along its bark, bringing your focus back to the present. Behind you, the fire hums with a low, steady crackle. You take a slow breath, considering how many stories must have passed through those trading posts. Some were accurate, some exaggerated, and others shaped by memory and isolation. Still, each one helped define how a mountain man prepared for nights like this. As you return closer to the fire, you imagine a weathered trapper leaning over a rough counter, snow clinging to his beard, offering advice in a quiet tone. Something like this. Pick a sleeping spot with branches overhead, but not too many, because heavy snow can break them and send them crashing down during the night. This warning appears repeatedly in first-hand accounts, mentioned by men who had heard limbs crack before plunging into their camps. Whether every detail was true or not, the advice clearly endured. You sit beside your bedding and pass your hands over the buffalo robe. The fur feels warm where you rested earlier, though the edges have cooled. You draw it closer and settle near the fire again. As you look into the glowing coals, it becomes clear that mountain men carried these spoken lessons across every mile of wilderness. Their lives depended on it. Written records were uncommon, and even when writing was possible, frozen ink made winter journaling difficult. Knowledge moved by word of mouth and memory. A sound stirs in the trees behind you, light and careful, like an animal moving through snow. You turn slowly and listen. The noise fades, then returns as soft crunching, likely a deer or a fox. You remain still, watching shadows shift at the edge of the firelight. Older trappers taught men to identify animals by sound at night. Deer stepped gently and paused often. Elk moved more heavily through the snow. Cougars traveled with an unsettling silence that raised the hair on a man's neck. You tilt your head and listen again, recalling an unusual piece of advice shared across several accounts. Some trappers believed that hearing 3 evenly spaced steps at night meant you should sit up immediately. They claimed predators sometimes moved in steady rhythm before circling. Historians continue to debate whether this pattern truly occurred or developed from a handful of encounters. You sit beside your bedding again and run your hands over the buffalo robe. The fur remains warm where you rested, though the edges have cooled once more. You pull it in and settle near the fire. Staring into the embers, you are reminded that mountain men relied on these spoken lessons across the wilderness. Their survival relied on memory, not paper. Written notes were rare, and winter conditions often made them impossible. The sound disappears completely. Whatever animal passed nearby has gone. You lean back on your hands and breathe deeply, letting the cold air fill your lungs. Firelight spreads across the snow, a warm glow in an otherwise pale landscape. You adjust the robe and move slightly closer to the flames. Once again, you imagine yourself inside a trading post lodge, surrounded by quiet voices, crackling firewood, and the sounds of men preparing gear for the journey back into the mountains. Their conversations overlap. One man advises another to dry socks near the coals but never directly above them, since trapped steam could freeze again and chill the skin. Another insists the best sleep came with feet pointed toward the fire so boots stayed warm. Others debate whether rifles should be kept within reach or stored away from sparks that could damage the wood. You find yourself smiling again. So many small habits, each shaped by experience. Even now, The frontiersman's advice lingers in the spaces between snapping logs and the distant wind. You take a slow breath and let the thoughts settle. The world feels older, more solid, as if the presence of those trappers remains in their warnings. Their shared knowledge helped many survive in places like this long before you arrived to understand their lives. You draw the robe tighter as the cold presses in again. The fire burns low but steady, and the pine boughs beneath your bedding release a faint scent when you shift. You sink deeper into the warmth and allow your thoughts to rest in that inherited wisdom. You sense how much passed from one voice to another, from one tired traveler to the next, in exchanges that carried real consequence. The night grows deeper, the forest quiets, the fire breathes softly, and you feel slightly less alone. You settle closer to the fire once more, wrapping the buffalo robe around your shoulders as the flames pulse gently. Warmth brushes your face, while the darkness beyond remains watchful. You realize that fire, despite its comfort, demands care. Mountain men treated it as a companion that required attention, protection, and restraint. Fire could preserve life or destroy it, depending on how well it was managed. You lean forward and place a thin log into the embers. The fire grows brighter, its light spreading into a calm, steady warmth. With it comes a clear historical understanding. Trappers in the Rocky Mountains often slept facing the fire, not for comfort alone, but because the shifting glow helped them detect approaching animals or unexpected danger. Their rest was never complete. Sleep blended with awareness. Even wrapped in heavy robes, true relaxation was rare. You watch the flames lift and sink. The sound remains soft, like dry paper gently folding. Over time, men who traveled these ranges learned to manage a fire carefully, keeping it from roaring too loudly or fading too fast. Too much flame invited attention. Too little meant waking stiff with cold. You sense that careful balance now, recognizing how the fire serves as both reassurance and signal. You adjust your position on the pine boughs and look into the surrounding darkness. Branches overhead sway, casting shadows that resemble cautious shapes moving along the treeline. The fire's flicker gives the forest a restless quality, as if it breathes and shifts with every light breeze. You pull the robe closer around your chest. A curious recollection surfaces from something you once read about winter camps. A seasoned frontiersman once wrote that he felt the fire observed him as closely as he watched it. He claimed sparks sometimes leapt as if on purpose, suggesting the flames had a character of their own. Whether he intended this as a reflection of isolation or a sincere belief rooted in wilderness lore remains uncertain. Scholars still debate whether such remarks reflect poetic habit or the mental strain of solitude. The night cools further, and a deeper silence settles across the clearing. You notice the cold intensifying with each breath. The fire crackles softly, releasing small sparks that spiral upward before vanishing into the frozen air. Without thinking, you lean closer, shielding the flame whenever the wind stirs. Mountain men did the same, guarding fragile embers during storms, treating them like seeds of survival. A sound breaks the quiet. Something snaps in the woods, perhaps a branch bending under ice. It is sharp, then gone. You lift your head and listen. The fire pops again, but the forest stays still. You ease back into the robe, aware of how the firelight spreads shifting patterns across the snow. You recall reading that many trappers positioned their fires slightly to the side rather than directly ahead. This prevented the brightness from overwhelming their vision and hiding movement beyond the light. Fire could warm the face, but it also reduced the ability to see into the dark. Historians continue to debate how common this practice was, but the reasoning remains sound. Even warmth carried risk. You adjust the firewood again, encouraging a low, even burn. Heat moves gently across your hands and face. This is not the deep heat of a hearth, but a limited warmth reaching only a short distance. Beyond that boundary, the cold remains firm and unyielding. You stretch your legs toward the fire and let the buffalo robe fall in heavy folds around your waist. The fur feels warmer from contact with your body, and you draw it tighter with quiet contentment. Beneath you, the pine boughs shift softly, releasing another faint trace of evergreen scent. The firelight settles into a muted orange glow over your hands. You think about how mountain men often woke hourly to place a single stick on the fire, just enough to keep frost from forming on their coverings. Some buried embers in shallow pits beneath their bedding, using the earth to hold warmth. Others allowed the fire to fade and depended entirely on their robes. Each man developed habits shaped by experience, mistakes, and narrow escapes. A sudden gust sweeps across the clearing. The flames dip sharply. You raise your arm to block the wind, leaning to protect the fire. It steadies, embers brightening once more. You sit back and wrap the robe around your shoulders. Another memory surfaces, drawn from a letter written by an explorer. He described nights when the cold felt especially severe and the fire seemed to hum, producing a faint vibration in the air, as if it carried a hidden voice. Modern analysts still question whether this was an auditory illusion caused by extreme cold or a poetic way of describing solitude. Whatever the cause, you almost sense that sound now as the flames move before you. The fire's light softens as the night deepens. You scan the clearing and notice how still everything has become. Branches sway less. The wind slows. The snow seems to wait. You adjust the robe, feeling warmth build gradually from within. You inhale deeply and close your eyes briefly. One side of your face is warmed by the fire while the other meets the cold, creating a quiet balance. This matches the accounts left by mountain men. Comfort mixed with alertness. Sleep never fully arrived, but it came in fragments. You open your eyes and watch another spark drift upward. The night stays dark and uncertain, but the fire holds steady, requiring only a few logs and your attention. You settle deeper into the pine boughs, keeping the fire in view, allowing its steady glow to guide you further into the night. Warmth and shadow merge, forming a small world where safety and risk exist together in a fragile circle. You remain still beside the fire, listening to its soft crackle as the darkness thickens. Beyond the edge of light, the forest feels immense and unreadable, layered with quiet mysteries revealed only through sound. You pull the buffalo robe higher and tilt your head, letting your hearing sharpen. This was how mountain men endured nights like this. Before sight, before equipment, they listened. At first the air is so still it feels suspended, but slowly sound returns. A light breath of wind moves through the pines. Snow drops from a high branch with a dull thud. Something small darts beneath a bush, its tiny steps crunching like paper pressed into ice. These sounds blend into a wilderness rhythm, calming yet slightly unsettling. As you listen, a familiar frontier idea comes back to you. Mountain men often judged camp safety by nighttime noise. When the forest fell completely silent, they grew uneasy. Silence could signal predators, changing weather, or nothing at all. But the uncertainty itself was troubling. Gentle, scattered noise suggested the natural order remained intact. You close your eyes briefly, focusing on the pattern of sound. The wind shifts, brushing cold across your cheek before fading. Far away, a fox barks softly. The sound carries cleanly through the frozen air, weaving between trees before dissolving into stillness. You adjust slightly on your bed of pine boughs, needles whispering beneath you. The familiar scent of sap rises once more, grounding and calm. You feel the heat of the fire warming one side of your body while the other side remains chilled, a contrast that heightens your awareness. If you focus closely, the forest around you seems to shift and breathe like a vast creature at rest, its rhythm slow and steady. A faint scraping noise draws your attention. You turn slightly, watching the narrow boundary where firelight gives way to darkness. The sound returns, followed by a soft rustle. You lean forward a little but stay composed. Small animals often approach fires, guided by curiosity or the hope of warmth. You imagine a rabbit or perhaps a cautious mink slipping through the brush, pausing to sniff, then darting away. Your thoughts drift to a strange story you once read in an old trapper's journal. The writer claimed he could forecast the weather by listening to owl calls at night. According to him, 3 evenly spaced hoots signaled snowfall, while irregular calls suggested clear weather. Today, no one can say for certain whether this belief came from careful observation or was simply a personal theory shaped by long winters. Modern readers remain divided, interested in the narrow boundary between frontier superstition and practical, experience-based knowledge. You hear no owls tonight, Yet the quiet between gusts of wind feels meaningful in its own way. The fire snaps again, sending a small burst of sap into the air with a soft hiss. The noise startles a nearby creature, and you hear it rush across the snow, its quick steps fading into the trees. You allow yourself a slight smile. Even in winter, the forest remains active. A heavier sound follows, slow and steady, perhaps a tree adjusting under the weight of built-up snow. You listen closely as it repeats, long and drawn out, like an old hinge under strain. You picture the tree's trunk expanding and contracting with shifting temperatures, settling into the cold night. This kind of deep creaking was often mentioned in mountain men's journals. They learned to tell the difference between trees adjusting and the approach of larger animals, a skill that could separate safety from real danger. You take a slow breath, letting the cold air fill your lungs. The night feels thick, layered with stillness and movement waiting to be interpreted. Every sound reaches you with sharp clarity, offering small hints about your surroundings. Then you hear it, a gentle crunch in the snow, steady and deliberate. This is not the quick movement of a small animal, but a measured step. You straighten slightly, your attention narrowing. Another crunch follows, closer now. The rhythm feels intentional. You turn your head toward the treeline, careful not to break the calm. The fire flares briefly, casting warm light into the shadows. At first you see only vague outlines of branches and trunks, but the sound continues for several steps before stopping. You wait. These are the moments mountain men often wrote about, when the darkness seemed heavy with possibility. Sometimes the visitor was only a deer. Sometimes an elk searching for open ground. And sometimes, though less often, it was a predator moving through the snow with quiet purpose. You remain still, letting the night keep its secrets. Whatever passed through has paused, perhaps watching. After a long silence, you hear a soft exhale, almost like a sigh. Then the steps return, moving away now, lighter and less tense. Soon the sound disappears into the forest. You release a breath you had not realized you were holding. The fire crackles gently, as if satisfied it cast enough light to discourage trouble. You settle back into your robe and let the warmth surround you. As you relax, another piece of wilderness lore comes to mind. Some trappers claimed they could hear snow falling before it reached the ground. They described certain storms as announcing themselves with a quiet whisper, a faint hissing sound in the treetops. Researchers who later studied these claims offered various explanations, suggesting the men might have been hearing subtle wind changes or simply interpreting silence through imagination. The discussion continues, reflecting the uncertainty of nights like this one. You tilt your head upward and listen. For now, the sky remains quiet, though shifting clouds above hint at an approaching storm. You sense the change in the air, a slight shift in pressure that makes your skin tingle. The silence grows heavier, more expectant. You sit beside the fire, wrapped in your robe, surrounded by the layered sounds of the forest. Some noises comfort, others warn, and some simply remind you of the night's presence. Together, they tell the story of a wilderness that never fully rests. As you settle deeper into your bedding, you feel yourself becoming part of that story, one slow breath at a time. You pull the robe closer, letting the fire's glow soften the edges of the darkness. Still, you understand that warmth here is never certain. A sudden storm, a shift in wind, or a few poor decisions can change everything. Your thoughts turn to shelter, especially the kind mountain men relied on when conditions became severe enough to strip away all comfort. One of their most resourceful solutions was built not from canvas or hides, but from the snow itself. You stand and step into the clearing. The snow under your boots compresses with a solid crunch. Kneeling, you scoop some into your hands, feeling its fine, powdery texture. It slips through your fingers like cold sand, then binds together when pressed. That sensation makes the idea clear. This is the type of snow old trappers depended on when storms struck without warning or when they were far from camp. Frontier records widely note that experienced mountain men sometimes carved emergency snow shelters during the worst blizzards. These shelters, though simple compared to the refined winter structures built by indigenous peoples, still provided valuable insulation. Snow, despite its cold, traps air efficiently. When shaped properly, it becomes protection rather than a hazard. You brush your glove across the ground, clearing a small area. The fire glows behind you, its warmth faint from this distance. Your breath rises in pale clouds as you move farther from camp, searching for a deep drift. You find one at the base of a large spruce, its trunk bent under layers of snow. The drift forms a smooth mound nearly reaching your waist. You press your hand into it, feeling the snow resist just enough. The deal. Using the back of your glove, you begin packing the surface, firming the outer layer. As you work, you recall an unusual detail from a trapper's winter journal. He claimed a snow shelter worked best when built on the north side of a tree, believing it captured moonlight and gave the interior a faint glow. Whether this was a real observation or simple embellishment remains unclear. Even today, specialists debate whether the line should be read as poetic description or literal experience. You continue moving around the drift, packing the snow in steady, rhythmic motions. Your hands grow numb despite the gloves, but you keep working. A low doorway begins to form at knee level. You carve it carefully, scooping snow away, then pressing it back into place to compact and reinforce the walls. Slowly, the shelter takes shape, a rounded hollow cut into the drift. The entrance remains narrow, only wide enough to crawl through. Small gaps help prevent cold air from rushing inside. Mountain men understood this naturally, long before scientific reasoning explained why it worked. You pause and sit back on your heels, noticing a thin line of cold sliding down your spine. Inside, the space is cramped, just enough room to curl your body. Yet as soon as you lean your head inside, the change is clear. The wind softens into a distant murmur. The air becomes still, heavy, and unusually quiet. For a brief moment, it feels as though the world itself has paused. You sit within the chamber, knees drawn close. The scent of pine from a nearby tree drifts in through the entrance. The snow walls give off a faint glow, reflecting the small amount of moonlight that filters inside. The feeling is soothing, almost unreal. It becomes clear why some frontiersmen described snow shelters as winter caves, places where storms could rage outside while the interior stayed calm and protective. You crawl back out and rise, brushing snow from your clothing. As you do, you recall a remark from a modern historian you once heard. He noted that scholars still debate how frequently mountain men relied on snow shelters, suggesting that the physical effort required to build them made their use rare except in extreme circumstances. Others argue that survival often depended on exactly that level of effort. The discussion remains unresolved, much like the cold wind sliding across the snow near your boots. You walk around the shelter once more, appreciating its straightforward design. A white dome, warmed by breath inside, exposed to the storm beyond. Snow drifts down gently, settling along its curve like fine lace. You run your hand across the surface. The snow feels solid, nearly frozen. That firmness is reassuring. Nearby, the wind strengthens, carrying a sharp cold that stings your face. You pull your robe tighter as you head back toward the fire. Behind you, moonlight glints off the snow, highlighting the rounded shelter you shaped. It appears small, yet surprisingly strong, a reminder that even in harsh terrain, safety can be made from the same elements that threaten you. You settle beside the fire again, extending your hands toward its light. Warmth returns slowly to your fingers. The pine boughs beneath your bedding shift as you move, releasing their familiar evergreen scent, both calming and old. You imagine a mountain man caught in a blizzard, his beard stiff with ice, crawling into a snow shelter like yours, the storm roaring outside, the land buried in white. Inside, there is stillness, a pocket of warmth, a brief refuge where the cold cannot reach. You close your eyes for a moment and picture the silence of such a space. You now understand why shelter building was a skill worth learning. In this environment, the line between safety and exposure is measured in minutes, not hours. The fire continues to burn steadily. The forest hums quietly. Your snow shelter rests in the distance, its rounded form blending into the landscape. For now, you stay in the open, listening as the night grows softer, carrying the knowledge of that shelter like a quiet warmth inside you. The mountains demand ingenuity, and tonight you have answered with a simple piece of winter craft shaped from snow and silence. You lower yourself beside your bedding again, letting the fire warm your legs while the cold brushes your back like a slow-moving presence. You pull the buffalo robe around you and reflect on another truth mountain men understood well. Sometimes the greatest source of warmth was not fire, not hides, not even shelter. It was another person. The idea seems obvious now, but during long, isolated winters, it carried layers of practicality, discomfort, and quiet acceptance. You lie back on the pine boughs and picture the scene clearly. Two exhausted trappers, snow falling without pause, the fire barely holding against the wind, hides failing to block the cold, clothing soaked, boots frozen stiff. In such moments, sharing body heat was not about pride, but survival. Many frontier accounts mention that trapping partners often slept close together, especially during severe storms or after wading through icy rivers. It was less about companionship and more an understanding that warmth spread best when bodies were close. Heat travels outward, and in the Rockies, anything that produced warmth was valuable. You draw the robe tighter, imagining another person beside you in this wide, frozen wilderness. For the trappers, this practice was routine, as necessary as collecting wood. Still, many described it with awkward humor, as if admitting that winter erased boundaries they preferred to keep. You smile slightly, remembering a story from a fur brigade traveler who wrote that one partner would only share a bedroll if he slept on the outside, claiming he did not trust the other man's elbows. Whether complaint or joke, the image remains vivid. These small human details soften the severity of the mountains, adding a different kind of warmth. Another account comes to mind, stranger still. One trapper claimed he slept best lying back to back with a companion, believing that aligned spines created a shared channel of heat. Later readers found the wording amusing. Even so, some modern winter campers still note that back-to-back sleeping can conserve warmth better than many solo methods. Today, there is no clear agreement on whether this technique offers measurable benefits, and comparisons between historical accounts and modern studies continue to produce mixed conclusions. You shift slightly, imagining the steady presence of another body beside you. The pine boughs compress softly beneath you. The fire's glow deepens into a warm red pool, lighting the edges of your robe. Out here, warmth does more than comfort. It steadies the body and mind. You lean forward and place another branch on the fire. The flames rise, sending fresh heat over your hands. Even now, with a strong fire, you feel the cold pressing at your sides, your knees, the back of your neck. Sitting alone near a fire only offers partial relief. The trappers understood this well. You picture two men huddled beneath a single bison robe, snow piling over their shelter as wolves called somewhere far off. In those moments, pride gave way to necessity. Shoulders pressed together, sometimes legs as well, one body's heat strengthening the other's. It was not comfortable and often unpleasant, but it kept them alive. You stand and walk a short distance toward the treeline. The night has grown even quieter, the cold tightening its hold. Your breath rises in slow, heavy clouds. You peer into the darkness, hearing only the faint crackle of branches bending under frost. When you turn back to the fire, the clearing feels more enclosed, more personal, warmer than before. The idea of shared warmth stays with you, a reminder that solitude and survival rarely aligned in the Rockies. The wilderness demanded cooperation in ways few men openly acknowledged by day. You return to your bedding and settle into the robe, pulling it close around your chest. You can almost sense how the old trappers arranged their sleeping areas. They layered hides beneath themselves for insulation, then draped another over both bodies. They slept close, not only for warmth but for efficiency, conserving resources and minimizing the fuel needed to last through the night. A faint breeze brushes your cheeks. The fire flickers, embers glowing in patterns that almost seem to breathe. The cold sharpens for a moment, and you immediately understand why sharing body heat was not a last resort, but a carefully practiced strategy in harsh seasons. Your thoughts return to the peculiar claim about aligned spines. The idea lingers, blending oddly with your own experience of the cold. Some frontier practices only make sense when you occupy the exact spot they once did, in the stillness of a frozen forest, night pressing in from every direction. You inhale deeply, feeling your chest rise beneath the robe. Warmth spreads around your core, but your extremities remain chilled. The trappers understood this well. Heat is uneven, reluctant to travel unless something guides it outward. The fire crackles, sending sparks dancing into the night. A pulse of warmth brushes your face. You nestle further into the bedding and close your eyes for a moment, imagining another body pressed close, sharing heat silently. Pure practicality. Pure survival. The forest exhales quietly. The mountains remain vast and unforgiving, yet for a moment, you sense the subtle bond between men sharing a winter night. Not friendship, not trust necessarily, but a mutual understanding born from cold necessity and the unspoken knowledge that no one truly survives alone. You open your eyes and feel the fire's gentle warmth, the robe's softness, and the resilience of pine boughs beneath you. You gain a new understanding of the old mountain men. Even the toughest relied on warmth not from the wild, but from one another. In the deep silence of the Rockies, survival was a shared act. You linger beside the quiet fire, letting its heat seep into your fingers before remembering another practical trick the trappers relied on when the cold became unbearable. Slowly, you sit up, the buffalo robe sliding across your lap, and glance at the ring of rocks surrounding your fire. Even now, the stones near the base glow faintly, holding the day's warmth like small, slumbering hearts. You move closer, brushing aside a layer of powdery snow. Warm stones were a trusted frontier remedy, as dependable as hides or shared body heat. Tonight, you aim to understand how they used this simple gift from the earth. You reach for a smooth stone at the fire's edge. Through your glove, you feel its soft, steady warmth. It's not burning, but persistent. You turn it with your fingertips, revealing the side closest to the flames, glowing faintly reddish, almost as if it remembers the fire better than the wood does. A common practical insight from early winter travelers comes to mind. Many trappers heated stones before bed, slipping them beneath their bedding or near their feet. The stones radiated gentle warmth through the night, buying precious hours of sleep before the cold reclaimed the land. They used what nature provided, finding in stone a quiet resilience that mirrored their own. You lift the stone carefully, letting it cool slightly. Another stone catches your eye, flatter, smoother. You test its temperature. Warm enough to comfort, but not so hot as to scorch a hide. Perfect. You place it on a patch of snow. Steam rises in soft curls, mixing with the cold night air. The warmth melts the icy crust slightly, releasing the earthy scent beneath. A memory surfaces. A trapper once claimed that riverbed stones held heat better than stones from dry ground, insisting they absorbed water and sun. Whether poetic exaggeration or careful observation, the notion remains debated. Frontier scholars still ponder if river stones were truly superior, or if personal habit shaped this preference. You gather several stones, selecting them by size and shape. Some are round and heavy, others flat and broad. The fire flickers, painting snow in golden warmth and deep blue shadows. You feel the stones one by one, placing the warmer ones on pine needles beside you, and nudging cooler ones closer to the fire. Heating stones seems almost too simple. Yet it worked brilliantly. You imagine a mountain man settling into his bedding after a long day through ravines and frozen streams. He would slip one stone beneath his lower back, another near his feet, maybe one tucked into his robe. These pockets of heat could prevent frostbite, especially during the darkest, coldest hours. You kneel, checking another stone. Its surface crackles faintly as warmth meets freezing air. Turning it over, you notice the contrast between warm underside and cooling top. The fire pops behind you, sending sparks skyward. The winter wind stirs the scent of cold pine and smoke. You place each stone strategically around your bedding, two beneath pine boughs near your hips and lower back, one at the foot of your bed to radiate heat, and another under the blanket's edge to warm your hands during the early hours. You pause, considering the arrangement. It feels almost ritualistic. Each stone has its place. The mountain men learned this through trial and error, adjusting stones like a musician tuning an instrument. A poorly placed rock might roll away or cool too quickly. A well-placed one could be the difference between shivering and sleeping soundly until dawn. Settling into your robe, you feel the first stone's warmth beneath you. You recall a scholarly debate. Some argued heated stones offered only brief relief, barely enough to matter. Others contended that even a short burst of warmth in sub-zero conditions could lull a traveler into restorative sleep, conserving precious energy. The usefulness of these stones often depended less on theory than on circumstance. You stretch your legs, letting the hidden stones share their heat. The pine boughs respond softly under your weight with a fragrant rustle. The fire casts amber glimmers and deep shadows across the scene. You take in the night once more, the forest settling into stillness, snow whispering through branches, the distant crack of shifting ice echoing faintly. The air feels dense, serene, as if the mountains themselves have drawn a deep breath and held it. Warm stones beneath your back, fur across your chest, fire at your side, pine beneath your body, all simple elements, combined into a small, efficient system of survival. You stretch again, letting the stones quietly share their heat. The pine boughs bend gently under your weight, responding with a quiet, fragrant rustle. The fire casts its glow from the side, painting the clearing in amber light and deep shadows. You lie back fully, your head resting near the pine's gentle slope. Heat from the stones spreads through your muscles, easing tension from your spine. You breathe slowly and deeply, letting warmth seep into areas stiffened by the cold. This was how mountain men survived winter, not through brute force, but through small, clever acts that captured heat from unexpected places. The stones beneath you work their quiet magic, and gradually, the cold begins to retreat. You shift slightly, feeling the stones radiate steady warmth, and your thoughts turn to another simple shelter the mountain men often built when conditions or time were limited. Rising slowly, you brush pine needles from your robe and scan the clearing for long, straight branches. Moonlight spills through the trees, revealing fallen limbs scattered like forgotten tools across the snow. A linto made from hides and poles was one of the most common frontier shelters, quick to build and surprisingly effective against harsh winds. You approach a cluster of fallen branches, testing each. Some crumble with rot, others are too thick. You select several strong, flexible poles about the length of your outstretched arm. Cold and rough beneath your gloves, their bark grips your fingertips like weathered skin. Carrying the poles back toward the fire, your breath curls into the night air. You recall accounts from frontier trappers. Lintos were often made by leaning poles against a tree trunk and draping a buffalo hide or canvas over them, forming a slanted wall to shield against the wind. Not a complete shelter, but enough to turn discomfort into safety when storms appeared without warning. Planting one end of a pole in the snow, you rest the other against a thick pine trunk. The angle is right, steep enough to shed snow, wide enough to crawl beneath. Pressing the pole with your weight, you anchor it securely. The fire crackles behind you, shadows dancing across your simple frame. A second pole follows, then a third, forming a rib-like structure leaning against the tree. A memory from an old trapping diary surfaces. The writer claimed the best lintos were made from branches struck by windstorms, as if the wood already knew how to lean. Whether metaphorical or literal, the idea continues to puzzle enthusiasts of frontier lore. You drape your imagined hide across the poles, pulling it taut to form a protective wall. The hide thumps softly against the wood, its fur brushes your gloves with muffled strokes. Snow falls from the trees above, dusting your shoulders as if the forest approves. The linto takes shape quickly, its slanted surface blocking the wind and creating a calm pocket beneath. Kneeling inside, the air feels different. Outside, the cold continues its steady presence, but here, it becomes distant and muted. Sitting back on your heels, you run your hand along the hide. Its surface feels warm compared to the frigid air. You imagine two trappers under a similar structure, boots steaming, breath fogging the air, waiting for the storm to pass. A linto did not solve every problem, but paired with a fire, it made the night far more bearable. Stepping back, you study your shelter. The fire's glow turns the hide into a warm amber shape against the snow. Heat reflects downward, forming a small basin of warmth. The pine boughs beneath cushion your weight, the stones radiate gentle heat, and now the linto blocks the wind. Every element works together, cold, wood, fire, and instinct in quiet harmony. Returning inside, you sit beneath the slanted hide. A drop of melting snow lands softly near your knee. Pine scent fills the air, mingling with the faint musk of the hide and the fire's smoky breath. You inhale deeply, grounding yourself in the moment. Another detail from a lesser-known memoir comes to mind. Some men kept small charms or tokens inside their lintos, believing they brought good dreams or safer sleep. Whether superstition or influence from indigenous neighbors, the reasoning remains a historical puzzle. Shifting again, you feel warmth from the fire, captured by the hide and directed toward you. The linto creates a quiet pocket, a hollow of comfort from branches and hide. Flames ripple across the fur, casting a gentle dance of light. Outside, the mountains remain cold and the night deep, but inside, you feel secure. Tightening your robe, the heat soaks into your chest. Wind brushes the hide, flexing it gently. Placing a palm on a supporting pole, you feel the tension humming through it, the structure alive with the subtle push and pull of winter air. You sit back, listening to the quiet beneath your shelter. Warmth spreads, the fire glows, the hide shifts softly. The mountains exhale, and the cold feels less threatening, more like a presence you can manage. Through careful, practical choices, you've created a refuge, a slanted wall of hide and poles guided by the knowledge of men who slept under these stars before you. With the shelter behind and the fire ahead, night settles gently. You ease under the linto, the hide resting behind your shoulders, firelight flickering across the snow. For a brief moment, everything is calm. Heated stones radiate warmth, pine boughs cradle your weight, and the simple shelter shields you from the restless breeze. Yet, as any mountain man knew, the Rockies rarely remain gentle. You lift your head, sensing a shift, a distant murmur in the treetops. Then, a sudden drop in temperature, sharp and immediate, like a curtain pulled tight across the clearing. You inhale sharply, cold settling deep in your lungs. The storm is rising. You climb out from beneath the lean-to and scan the dark horizon. The stars that shone moments ago have blurred into faint streaks. Thin clouds race overhead, gathering speed. The wind curls around your legs now, not playful, but sharp and purposeful, gaining strength, as if the mountains themselves are bracing. A memory from old winter journals surfaces. Trappers often claimed they could sense storms forming, not by sight, but by pressure on their skin. Some noticed the forest fall silent. Others felt the air thicken. You experience both sensations now, and the hair at the back of your neck prickles. Through small, careful choices, you've built a refuge in the wild, a slanted wall of hide and poles, crafted by your own hands and guided by the wisdom of men who once slept beneath these same stars. You move quickly to reinforce it, pressing the hide tight against the poles and kicking snow along the base to seal gaps. As you work, you recall a detail from a trapper's notebook. He survived a storm by singing to the wind, believing the sound coaxed the gusts to pass him more gently. The wind rises again, louder now, bending the pine branches above. They groan under the strain, releasing low rumbles as snow falls in heavy clumps around your camp. The urgency sinks into your bones. In the Rockies, storms can form in minutes, swallowing a valley in roaring winds and blinding snow. The gusts hit the clearing with full force, snow slicing sideways against your coat. You duck into the lean-to, pulling the hide low as icy flakes swirl inside. The structure groans but holds. You brace an arm against the nearest pole, feeling it tremble beneath your hand. Whether superstition, delirium, or a man's attempt at humor, modern readers debate the trapper's tale, yet you can picture him crouched beneath a fragile shelter, voice trembling as the storm raged. Inside, the storm sounds muted to a low growl. You feel it in your chest more than your ears. Each gust presses against the hide, as if night itself tries to force its way inside. Cold slips through every crack, brushing your cheeks. You tighten your robe and adjust the heated stones beneath you. Their warmth has dimmed, yet still offers a stubborn glow against the creeping chill. You curl up, letting the hide settle around you like a heavy cloak. The fire outside flickers violently, shrinking and bursting back to life as wind wrestles with it. The storm sound becomes deafening, wind shrieking through branches like distant voices, snow scouring the ground in wild patterns. Their fear, captured in old journals, comes alive in the howling wind. You recall another account. 2 trappers buried their fire completely under drifting snow, digging it out 3 times before retreating into a crude shelter. Historians debate whether the story was exaggerated, though some argue the storm matches recorded blizzards in the Rockies. Minutes stretch, or perhaps hours. Time distorts under such storms. The world shrinks to a trembling triangle of hide and branches. You listen carefully. The wind loses some of its sharpness. The roar softens to a steady rush. Lifting the hide cautiously, you see snow pouring in heavy curtains, but the worst has passed. The fire lies half buried, reduced to red embers, yet still alive. You smile despite the cold. The flame endured. You crawl out, brushing snow from your sleeves. The storm swirls, but its fury has softened. The air is crisp and brittle. The temperature has dropped further. Moonlight casts a muted glow on the clearing. Your shelter stands firm, draped in snow like part of the forest. Kneeling by the embers, you coax them back to life with twigs, the glow casting long shadows. Once more, you wrap the robe around yourself and breathe deeply. The storm has passed its peak, leaving a quiet, heavy world blanketed in fresh snow. You, like the mountain men before, have endured it. Rising slowly, brushing snow from your sleeves, you step beyond the shelter. The wind hisses softly, and the fire burns steadily. Breath clouds drift as you stretch. Snow blankets the world, reshaping it under the muted sky. You pause, letting the calm settle into your ears. A thought surfaces, echoing mountain men's instinct for safe campsites. You walk toward the treeline, boots crunching in fresh snow. Animal tracks scatter like notes in a forgotten winter melody, deep elk prints, light rabbit hops, zigzagging mouse trails. The patterns feel reassuring. Frontier writings note that trappers often followed animal trails to find safe places. Areas frequented by wildlife were usually free of sudden dangers like avalanches or cold air pockets. You step beside narrow hoofprints, noting how they weave through the trees, avoiding dips in the terrain. Following them for a short distance, you move quietly through the snow. The forest feels calmer, the air crisp and clear. Snow-laden branches bend gracefully, forming archways. The quiet is so complete your footsteps feel intrusive. An unusual recollection emerges. A trapper once claimed that elk could predict weather better than humans. If they bedded early, he prepared for a harsh night. If restless, winds were coming. Historians debate this. Some see instinctive wildlife responses to pressure changes, others see patterns imposed by humans. In winter survival, instinct and guesswork often blur. You stop beside a cluster of spruce trees and crouch near the snow. A fresh set of tracks leads into a narrower path between 2 boulders. You notice how the trail curves gently, avoiding a steep embankment where the snow looks unstable. Without testing it, you instinctively know stepping there could collapse the mound. The animals avoided it naturally, and you marvel at their instinct. Turning back toward your fire, you trace your own footprints. Your shelter appears as a small dark triangle beneath pale branches, half buried in snow. The fire's orange glow flickers softly, casting warm ripples across the clearing. Kneeling again by the fire, you feed it a small log. The flames respond with a low, grateful roar. Warmth seeps into your fingers, easing the cold that clung to them as you followed the tracks. You stretch your hands toward the glow, feeling the fire pulse gently against your palms. Sitting back on the pine boughs, the heat spreads through your limbs. A memory surfaces, whispered from wilderness lore. Some mountain men believed sleeping near well-used animal trails brought better dreams. They said animals carried a kind of calm, leaving invisible threads of ease along their routes. Whether this notion came from real experience or the long, lonely nights in the wild remains unclear. Folklore scholars still debate its origin, noting how deeply superstition and sleep intertwined on the frontier. You rest your hand on the buffalo robe beside you, feeling warmth rising from hidden stones below. The fire crackles softly. The lean-to blocks the wind, and the scent of pine drifts through the cold. Snow falls lightly, tiny flakes drifting like soft whispers. You glance at the animal tracks again. The path disappears into the dark line of trees, a reminder that the forest follows its own logic. In observing these subtle signs, you feel a quiet kinship with trappers who once read the land like a story shared only with those who listened closely. Settling into your bedding, you draw the robe around your shoulders. Warmth gathers as the night deepens, the fire glowing steadily. The animal-traveled ground beneath you feels strangely welcoming. In this vast wilderness, you sense that safety often hides in the footsteps of creatures far more attuned to the land than you ever could be. You shift slightly beneath the robe, the heat from the stones fading to a gentle warmth. Outside, the forest whispers in low breaths rising and falling with the breeze. The storm has passed, but the cold has grown sharper, almost brittle. The fire burns steadily now, small but confident, its glow flickering like a heartbeat across the snow. You stare into the flames, realizing your next task is not merely keeping the fire alive but deciding how much fire you actually want. Sitting up slowly, you brush loose snow from your sleeves. In your mind, countless stories of trappers and their careful dance with fire replay. Too much flame made a beacon in the night. Too little left cold gnawing at your bones until shivering overtook sleep. Old mountain men walked a fine line between warmth and discretion, and tonight you feel that same line tighten beneath your fingertips. You lean toward the fire, adding a thin branch. The flames rise but not too high, crackling softly. Drawing the robe closer, you recall a common observation from winter travelers. Trappers often built smoky fires deliberately, using damp wood or green bark to mask their presence. It wasn't ideal for comfort or cooking, but the thin haze concealed their camp from wandering eyes, human or animal. Reaching for a larger log, you hesitate. The night feels open and wide. Sending a tall plume of flame into that space seems unwise. Instead, you add a smaller piece to the embers. A faint trail of smoke curls upward, drifting lazily through the lean-to like a slow-moving ghost, catching the moonlight. This is the type of fire mountain men preferred. Enough to ease the cold, but not to announce their presence across the mountains. A memory surfaces from an old trapper diary. He claimed smoke carried a man's worries into the sky. Sometimes he watched the wisps until he felt lighter, emptied of burdens. Whether it was a real practice or poetic musing remains debated, but the image lingers as your own thin plume dissolves into the night. The wind shifts, brushing smoke toward the lean-to. You cough lightly at its tang of charred pine and wonder how trappers endured nights of smoky fires without complaint. Perhaps they grew used to it, or perhaps they simply no longer noticed. You stand to adjust the lean-to's hide, lifting a corner to let in ventilation. The forest breathes in slow, rhythmic gusts. Flames flutter but remain steady. Lowering the hide again, you return to your bedding. Stones beneath the pine boughs still offer a stubborn hint of warmth. A distant thump and a gliding noise in the snow catch your attention. Sitting up slightly, alert but calm, you listen carefully. The sound fades quickly, likely a deer or fox on the trail. The fire crackles beside you, casting long, slender shadows across the snow. Your thoughts drift to another winter tale, a trapper who smothered his fire after nightfall, choosing darkness over visibility. He claimed the psychology of flame distracted him, and that he slept warmer without it. Later readers debated whether he tested a personal theory or merely grew tired of tending fires. You imagine him now, bundled in furs, trusting only his breath for warmth through long winter nights. Tucking your hands beneath the robe, you flex your fingers to restore circulation. Firelight plays across your knuckles. Even with the storm gone and woods quiet, judging the fire's size feels crucial. Too little warmth and sleep slips away. Too much and the night watches your clearing more closely. Leaning forward, you gently rake the embers, revealing a line of glowing coals. Heat pulses outward in soft waves. You build a small ring of thin twigs around it. You stack the wood lightly, coaxing the fire to glow without drawing too much attention. The flames respond gently, warming the air around your knees. You lean back, breathing slowly. Smoke rises in twisting, graceful ribbons, calming your mind and reminding you of how mountain men tended their fires. They didn't just light them and leave, they cared for them, measured them, understood them. Fire was a partner, not just a tool. The wind softens, brushing the trees like a gentle hand rather than a harsh gust. The forest settles, a hush spreading like a blanket over everything. You wrap the robe more snugly around your shoulders and sink deeper into your bedding. The faint warmth from the stones beneath combines with the fire's glow, creating a small pocket of comfort in the cold wilderness. You tilt your head and study the sky. Storm clouds drift apart, revealing faintly twinkling stars. The world feels open again, breathing freely after the storm. A memory surfaces from frontier days. Some trappers believed that smoke rising straight up meant calm weather, while smoke blown hard to the west predicted unrest. Experts debate this. Some see meteorological reasoning, others dismiss it as tradition, but the image of your smoke rising steadily comforts you regardless. You look back at the fire, its glow reflects on your hide, making your shelter feel alive. Shadows flicker as you breathe, connecting you to the countless winter nights mountain men endured. You add a final twig to the flames. The fire accepts it quietly, spreading warmth steadily. Nestled into the pine boughs, you let the stones warm your bones while the fire keeps its soft company. In this quiet, you understand why trappers paid such careful attention to their smoky fires, the balance they maintained, the judgment they honed through long nights of cold and solitude. Beneath the stars and surrounded by snow, the fire feels almost miraculous, just bright enough to provide warmth as night deepens. The buffalo robe gathers around you, and the fire dims to a soft pulse. The night grows quieter, colder, heavier. A stillness settles over the clearing, pressing against your ears until even your own breath seems loud. You glance up, the stars sharpen as clouds drift away. The air feels brittle, as if a loud sound might shatter it. You recognize this hour. Mountain men knew it well. The time just before dawn, when the cold becomes most merciless. It's not the darkest moment, nor the windiest, but a slow, inevitable chill seeps through everything: hides, blankets, shelters, even bone. You settle back into your bedding, pulling the robe tightly around you. Heated stones beneath have cooled but still provide enough warmth to prevent sinking into the frozen ground. Your stomach growls again, softer now, almost resigned. Hunger becomes a companion, not a threat, a reminder of the constant negotiation between comfort and cold. Mountain men endured nights like this, thin from long days, tested by the whisper of an empty belly. Breathing slowly, you let the cold air fill your lungs. The fire glows softly. The lean-to holds firm against the wind. The forest waits. You wait alongside it, hollow-stomached but steady, learning in your bones what the mountain men once endured. As the world lightens with the first hints of dawn, another truth surfaces: survival often depended as much on trusted companions as on food, shelter, or fire. Sitting up slowly, brushing snow from your shoulders, you watch the fire cast a reddish halo across the clearing. You imagine what it would feel like to have someone moving beside you. Another breath rising in the cold. Another pair of hands tending the fire. Another presence to ease the isolation that the deep Rockies often imposed on their travelers. Accounts from fur brigades repeatedly note that most trappers did not travel alone for long. They paired up, sometimes switching partners, sometimes sticking with a single trusted companion through entire seasons. These partnerships were practical, but also vital. One man could fetch water while the other repaired a boot. One could tend the fire while the other checked traps. On nights this bitter, working together meant fewer mistakes. You rise and pace a short circle around the clearing, your boots leaving crisp prints in the snow. You imagine a partner walking beside you, matching your steps, sharing quiet observations about how snow gathers at tree bases or the tracks leading to the river. Mountain men spent months in the wilderness, and even shared silence could feel like warmth. A memory from a frontier memoir comes to mind. One trapper suggested the best partnerships were not born from shared interests but from matched stubbornness. Two equally persistent men, he argued, survived better than mismatched pairs. Later readers found this idea amusing but oddly insightful. Whether stubbornness truly mattered, or whether the writer simply recognized himself in the story, remains open to interpretation. You stop at the riverbank, listening to the muted flow beneath the ice. You imagine two trappers crouched there, breaking the frozen surface to fill a kettle, one on lookout, the other chipping steadily with a hatchet. The shared rhythm of survival. The efficiency of trust. Turning back to your fire, you pick up a small branch, feeding the flames as they brighten. You settle onto the pine boughs, drawing the robe tightly around yourself. Warmth rises slowly, pulled upward by your body heat. For a moment, you picture two men reclining on similar bedding, boots pointing toward the fire, the crackle of flames binding them into a small, shared world. Partnerships among mountain men were rarely sentimental. Often blunt, practical, shaped by necessity, some men barely spoke, relying on gestures or short commands. Others shared stories, jokes, complaints, and wandering thoughts. Winter forged unusual bonds, flickering like firelight between companionship and survival. You breathe deeply, letting the warmth fill your chest. Another memory arises from a lesser-known trapping account. The writer claimed a man slept better if he trusted the person beside him, sensing unease in a restless partner even before fully waking. Whether literal or symbolic remains uncertain, but journals show survival partnerships demanded keen intuition. Shifting on the pine boughs, you imagine the comfort of someone watching the fire while you slept. Frontier life relied on dividing burdens. Tasks became manageable in pairs. One man broke trail, the other scanned the horizon. One carried traps, the other extra food. Even silence was shared, not heavy. The forest exhales, a long, low breath sweeping past the lean-to. Snow lifts from a branch and drifts down quietly. You look toward the treeline, sensing how the wilderness feels different with a reliable partner nearby, not tamer, but less lonely. You pull your robe tighter, letting fire warmth blend with lingering heat from the stones. In the dim pre-dawn, you sense the value mountain men placed on companionship, not friendship as we think of it today, but a bond forged through frost, distance, exhaustion, risk, and repeated endurance. You tilt your head toward the faint glow behind the trees. Daylight is distant but approaching, thin and patient. You breathe slowly. Partnerships made nights like these survivable, creating shared strength when cold seemed endless. Imagining another presence brings warmth no fire or robe could provide alone. You nestle deeper into your bedding, letting imagined warmth carry you through the final stretch of night. Curling into the buffalo robe, your stomach settles as the sky brightens slightly. The cold remains sharp, but the world feels less hostile. A glimmer of morning hovers beyond the horizon. You inhale the quiet and let it fill your chest. Rising slowly, you stretch stiff muscles, brushing snow from your sleeves. Stepping away from the fire, your boots sink gently into fresh powder. The clearing is calm, almost too calm. You picture mountain men centuries ago, caught between exhaustion and determination. They rarely slept through the night, often unable to afford it. Frontier accounts describe them taking brief rests instead of full nights of sleep, moments just long enough to catch warmth and breath. You imagine a weary trapper pausing beside a frozen trail, pulling his coat tight and curling into a small knot against the wind. No fire, no hides, just a desperate few minutes of rest. The memory settles in your bones. At the forest's edge, brushing aside a low branch, you recall a forgotten winter journal describing roadside rests. The writer claimed resting upright with hands under armpits and elbows tight helped him drift into sleep faster. Whether instinct or imagination, scholars still debate the practice. You smile, picturing him swaying slightly like a tired bird on a branch. Continuing across the clearing, a soft wind brushes your cheek. Cold feels thinner now, diluted by the promise of sunrise. You approach a fallen log, half buried in snow, brushing it clean and sitting carefully. A slow breath. You feel the exhaustion winter travelers carried after trudging through deep drifts. A pause on a log could feel like brief refuge. Some men described drifting in a strange state between waking and sleeping, with distant sounds and bodies tense against the cold. These moments weren't exactly restful, yet they provided enough clarity to keep moving forward. The forest around you whispers softly, branches shifting under the lingering night wind. You shift on the log and close your eyes briefly, taking a pause similar to a mid-journey rest. Your eyelids grow heavy almost immediately. Fatigue rises quietly through your limbs, nudging you toward ease. It's clear how easily someone could drift into sleep on the trail, perhaps too easily. A sharp inhale and the cold jolts you back to attention. Mountain men had to maintain a delicate balance. Rest too long, and the cold would drain their warmth faster than they could regain it. Sleep too deeply, and danger crept closer. These half-dreaming pauses were always short, disciplined, and followed by movement. A distant rustle in the trees pulls your focus back to the present. Perhaps a deer wandering through its morning routine. Perhaps a branch shifting from last night's storm. You listen carefully, then glance upward. The sky has brightened another shade. Stars fade slightly, their outlines softening. A memory surfaces from a winter explorer's journal. He claimed he could fall asleep standing upright during difficult stretches, one hand resting on his rifle. He described waking with a jolt, uncertain if moments or minutes had passed. Scholars debate whether this was literal or figurative. Some see it as extreme fatigue, others as metaphor. Regardless, the image endures. You rise from the log and walk toward your linto. The fire greets you with a faint hiss as a gust sweeps across the clearing. Kneeling beside it, you shift the embers, coaxing the glow into a brighter flame. A small piece of wood added to the top feeds the flame, and warmth slowly grows. Moving again feels restorative. The cold in your bones loosens, making space for heat. You settle back onto your pine boughs, pulling the robe over your legs. The world is still dim, but dawn's edges creep closer. You exhale slowly, letting your body sync with the fire's rhythm. You imagine a mountain man doing the same, sighing with fatigue, conserving energy, grateful for each small warmth that carries him through the day. You sit quietly, reflecting on these mid-journey rests. They were never luxurious, long, or entirely safe, yet they were essential. They taught trappers to listen to their bodies, manage energy wisely, and recognize that survival often hinged on small choices made in weakness. You draw the rope closer, feeling the fire's soft heat across your face. Night wanes and day waits beyond the trees. Rested just enough to regain strength, you prepare to face whatever the mountains demand next. Shifting on the pine boughs, you feel the faint stiffness of muscles as the sky brightens subtly. The fire beside you dims to embers, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. Cold still lingers at the edges, but dawn is near. Standing, you wrap the buffalo robe around your shoulders. Moving toward the treeline, your thoughts turn to another influence on mountain men's nights: the indigenous peoples whose lands they traversed. Trappers learned much from native communities, especially about winter survival, lessons seldom fully acknowledged. You step between spruces and notice how the wind softens beneath their branches. The snow here lies smooth, sculpted by the night. Pulling the robe tighter, you imagine early frontier lessons shared quietly, through observation, gesture, or conversation. Mountain men borrowed many sleeping techniques, particularly regarding orientation. Bedding was positioned with backs to prevailing winds, heads tilted slightly uphill to avoid cold air. You mimic this posture, sensing the subtle warmth it provides. A detail from an old account returns to mind. A trapper noted a native elder warming stones not directly by the fire, but first buried in snow near the flames. This moderated the heat, making the stones safer and longer lasting. Later readers debated whether this was common practice or misremembered, yet the image lingers, enriching the quiet knowledge of survival here. You walk deeper into the trees where wind fades. Crouching beside small saplings, you watch how snow layers on their branches. You imagine learning from someone born to this land, who could read the snow like text. Indigenous communities knew winter intimately, selecting natural depressions for shelter, using tree wells for sleeping, and creating warmth from little. Touching a spruce trunk, you feel the cool roughness under your glove and smell faint sap, grounding you. Another practice from winter ethnographies comes to mind: lining shelters with bark or grass mats to create a dry base for furs. Mountain men quickly adopted this, weaving grasses or drying bark strips before layering bedding. Scholars debate consistency, but the idea highlights cross-cultural learning in frontier survival. Returning to the clearing, your boots sink softly into snow. The sky above the treetops shows a pale gradient, hinting at daylight. You breathe in the stillness, thinking of trappers observing indigenous families, how they stored embers in ash-lined containers, built windbreaks from snow or boughs, and layered furs for shared warmth. At the edge of the clearing, you pause beside your linto. The hide glows faintly with emberite. Ducking under it, you sit on pine boughs, warmth gathering around your legs. Heated stones beneath you are now gentle, yet the robe retains most of the night's heat. Another memory arises. A missionary's winter account describes a native family sleeping with feet pressed together, creating a chain of warmth. Whether literal or misinterpreted, the concept reflects practical and intimate methods of sustaining heat through community. You sit quietly beneath the linto, listening to the forest stir awake. A soft flutter of wings passes overhead as a bird shifts on its perch. The cold feels less harsh now, softened by the knowledge that countless winters have been endured by those who came before. You glance toward the treeline, imagining the mountain men who once rested near indigenous camps, observing how fires were built, shelters crafted, and the cold met with calm, practiced skill rather than panic. Survival often depended on these quiet lessons. Pulling your robe tighter, you lean back against the boughs. The fire crackles softly, its glow acknowledging your presence. You breathe in deeply, letting warmth gather in your chest as the first light of dawn stretches slowly across the mountains. Wrapped in borrowed knowledge and inherited resilience, you feel a connection to the layered history of travelers who endured countless winters. The day begins. As the sky brightens, you settle deeper under the linto, feeling the cold slowly retreat from your robe's edges. The fire glows with renewed life, and the trees shimmer with the soft pale light of morning. You take a deep breath, letting the crisp air fill your lungs. Darkness has loosened its grip, and the world feels larger. Your thoughts drift toward another form of refuge the mountain men relied on when winter pressed hard, the small cabins they built to survive the frozen months. You step from beneath the linto, stretching your stiffened joints. A thin band of sunrise touches the treetops, coloring them faint gold. Walking slowly, you imagine the shelters trappers constructed in valleys with plentiful game and flowing water. Early fur trade records describe simple cabins, for walls of hand-cut logs, roofs of bark or hides, and small fire pits or stone chimneys. They were not permanent homes, just strong enough to withstand storms and winter cold. You picture one tucked between two pines, snow piled along its sides for insulation. The door might be a slab of wood or stretched hide. Inside, furs cover the floor, and a low fire burns in a small hearth, filling the air with smoke, pine pitch, and the scent of cooked meat. You brush your gloves across a spruce bark, feeling the rough texture. A memory from an old trapping journal emerges. The author described wintering with two companions in a crude cabin built in late autumn. He claimed the logs creaked through cold nights, as if the cabin itself shivered with them. Historians are unsure whether this was exaggeration or simply frozen wood shifting, but the image lingers. Three men huddled by a fire, listening as their tiny refuge groaned in the wind. Continuing uphill, you reach a small rise overlooking smooth snow, marked only by animal tracks. It seems like an ideal building site: level ground, natural windbreaks, nearby timber. You imagine cutting logs with a dull axe, stacking them carefully, sealing gaps with mud or moss. The work would be exhausting, but four walls shielding you from winter would feel almost luxurious. A cold breeze brushes your face, carrying a hint of smoke from your fire. Some cabins held curious details. One trapper lined his walls with spare animal skins, believing it kept the spirits of cold at bay. Whether literal or metaphorical, such practices reflect the imagination shaped by isolation. Long winter months, silent days, and restless nights inspired inventive rituals. Approaching your clearing, the linto comes into view, frost glistening on its hide. The fire glows warmly, inviting you back. Settling beside it, you pull your robe tight over the pine boughs. Stones beneath are cool, yet still retain faint heat. Closing your eyes, you imagine yourself inside a crude cabin. The fire burns inside a stone-lined hearth. Snow melts slowly from the roof. Logs creak under ice and wind. Warmth gathers in pockets around the room, like invisible blankets over sleeping men. You recall a detail from winter journals. A trapper slept best in a narrow bunk along a wall, believing the earth's warmth rose through the logs. Whether sensation or imagination, it shows how closely trappers observed subtle changes in heat. Opening your eyes, the first light pierces the trees, revealing fresh snow contours. Your linto seems small compared to the imagined cabin, yet you feel fondness for its simplicity. It stood through the storm, kept you dry, and created a tiny pocket of peace. Morning unfolds. Wrapping your robe tighter, you sit closer to the fire. The forest wakes gradually, stretching after the long night. Somewhere out there, mountain men endured winters in rough cabins, feeling cold seep in through cracks, wolves howling outside, sharing quiet conversations as snow drifted past windows. You feel connected to them, through the fire, the cold, and this small shelter you've built. As light grows, you sink deeper into the pine boughs, grateful for the warmth and the wisdom carried through generations of winter survivors. You sit quietly under your linto, fingers regaining sensation. Morning strengthens. Branches stir, a distant woodpecker taps, and your fire pulses warmth. The world is gentler than before. The cold loosens, and your thoughts drift to something softer, something that once helped mountain men endure long frozen nights, their dreams. You sink deeper into the pine boughs, the buffalo robe settling over your shoulders with reassuring weight. The warmth from the coals radiates across your legs in gentle waves. You close your eyes for a moment, picturing trappers resting beside similar fires, drifting to sleep with thoughts far beyond the wilderness. Even the toughest men on the frontier carried memories of home, the echo of familiar voices, the pull of warmth that wasn't born of fire. Journals from the fur trade era often note that mountain men dreamed vividly in winter. Cold, fatigue, and isolation stirred the mind into restless imagery. Some recalled dreams of home appearing more often in the darkest months. Others described campfires burning brighter than reality, or fields filled with summer grasses. These visions acted as anchors, offering comfort during endless nights. You shift slightly, letting the robe gather around your chest. The scent of pine rises again as you move. You picture yourself drifting into sleep just as an old trapper once wrote he did. He described nodding off beside the fire, seeing his childhood home as if he had never left, hearing his mother's voice, the kettle boiling, the hearth's warmth, details so vivid he insisted they felt more real than waking life. Scholars reviewing his journals debate whether such clarity stemmed from emotional strain or the physiological effects of extreme cold. No firm conclusion exists, but the intensity of his recollections continues to fascinate. You open your eyes, watching the embers shift softly. Firelight dances across the snow in slow ripples, hypnotic in their rhythm. On a night like this, it's easy to slip into dreamlike thoughts. After surviving the storm and the coldest hour, your mind feels loose, drifting between memory and imagination. You lean forward, stretching your hands toward the coals. A tingling warmth returns to your skin. You think of how trappers described drifting off beside a fire, the low crackle of burning wood, the wind's distant howl through trees, the groaning of frozen earth. These sounds merged with dreams, creating strange yet beautiful blends of reality and memory. Another recollection surfaces, a winter report from a small trapping party. One man reportedly muttered names in his sleep, speaking to absent people. He whispered a woman's name repeatedly, almost like a lullaby. Later readers remain uncertain whether this reflected exhaustion, loneliness, or the natural drift of dreams. The detail endures, adding a fragile humanity to men often remembered only for grit and bravado. You settle back onto the pine boughs, letting your head rest near the hide wall of your linto. The shelter creaks softly as a faint breeze brushes it. The world feels calm, almost gentle. You imagine slipping into dreams of your own, warmed by the fire, wrapped in furs, listening to the rustle of pine as the forest murmurs. Dreams were more than comfort, they were escape. They shaped the mental resilience of mountain men, months at a time surrounded by snow, danger, and silence. Some wrote that dreams soothed them, others said they confused them, blurring longing for home with acceptance of the wilderness as a new world. One journal told of a trapper waking in panic, convinced he was back in his childhood bed, only to find the fire dying and cold creeping into his bones. Modern interpreters debate whether such confusion reflected the emotional cost of isolation or psychological adaptation to constant exposure. You breathe slowly, letting these thoughts settle. The forest whispers as a small bird flits through the branches, shaking snow in tiny cascades. You pull the rope tighter and return your attention to the fire. You imagine trappers around a winter cabin, each wrapped in furs, a dim hearth flickering across their faces. Perhaps one shifts in sleep, another murmurs. Some dream of warm bread, open fields, or familiar paths long buried in memory. Even in rugged lives, sleep carried them elsewhere. Beneath your shelter, the warmth steadies against your chest. The harsh night has passed, and the cold has quieted. Fresh snow softens the world, dawn light tentative and pale. You close your eyes briefly, inviting the drifting sensation that carried those travelers across the thin border between waking and sleep. Images rise unbidden, the fire glows brighter, the robe feels heavier, and a warm room flickers in your imagination. It is not real, yet it feels familiar, comforting. You open your eyes, smiling faintly. The dreamlike edge lingers, blending smoke and half-forgotten memories. Dreams kept spirits alive, softened solitude, and often provided the only warmth through the coldest nights. Slowly, you rise from the pine boughs, the buffalo robe sliding from your shoulders, leaving a lingering heat. The sky lightens to soft blue-gray, promising a clearer day yet edged with winter's sharpness. You stretch, joints cracking gently, and step from beneath the lean-to. Snow crunches underfoot, crisp with dawn. Your fire has dwindled to glowing coals, enough to warm your hands but not to fend off the cold. You kneel, feeding it twigs until the embers brighten and a thin flame rises. The warmth spreads slowly, familiar and welcome. Morning in the Rockies demanded swift action. Frontier journals note that at first light, trappers moved quickly, breaking camp, repacking sparse belongings, checking traps, preparing for long miles. Morning reclaimed the trail, comfort waited later. You echo that urgency, dusting snow from your robe, adjusting boots, taking stock. The lean-to stands as a lopsided triangle beneath the trees, dusted with fresh frost. Pine boughs beneath your bedding still bear your imprint. Heated stones lie scattered, now slowly reclaimed by snow. Everything around you bears the quiet traces of a night endured. You start gathering your scattered belongings, moving slowly but with purpose. The forest is still, broken only by a distant woodpecker tapping and the occasional groan of a snow-laden branch. You brush the hide of the lean-to with your glove, releasing a cloud of powdery snow. A small sense of gratitude rises for the simple shelter that shielded you from the storm's force. As you work, a detail from an old traveler's letter comes to mind. He wrote that the morning's silence made him feel as if the mountains themselves were watching his every move. He tried to pack quietly, he said, to avoid disturbing the ridges. Whether literal or poetic, scholars remain divided. Some see it as a reflection of winter's loneliness, others as a depiction of the calm and respect the wilderness inspires. You sense a trace of that calm now, moving carefully, your steps muffled by fresh snow. You return to the fire and add a slightly larger stick. The flame strengthens, sending warmth across the clearing. You pause to savor it briefly, then begin dismantling the lean-to, lifting the hide from its poles. Snow falls as you shake it clean. The scent of cold fir mingles with pine. You fold the hide methodically. The poles hit the snow with soft thuds as you dismantle the frame, stacking them neatly beside the nearest tree. Though you won't need them again, the tidiness feels right. Mountain men often did the same. Several journals note that trappers kept camps tidy, part habit, part superstition, believing a well-kept site might bring better fortune later. The reasoning, practical or symbolic, is still debated. You step back and survey the clearing. The camp now looks bare. Shelter dismantled, bedding flattened, fire reduced to faint embers. Without your night's boundaries, the world feels larger. The cold air brushes your face with clarity. You pull the robe around your shoulders, the fur warming quickly under your breath. One cooled stone from your bedding rests in your gloved hands. Its smooth surface retains the memory of the fire. Mountain men once kept certain stones, convinced they held warmth or luck. One account tells of a trapper carrying a favored stone for months. Practical comfort or superstition, it's unclear. Later readers interpret such habits with curiosity or amusement. You return the stone to the snow and rise. Thin beams of early sunlight filter through the trees, scattering across frost like rivers of light. You breathe deeply, letting the cold settle in your lungs. A final slow circle around the clearing ensures nothing is left behind. Your tracks from the night curve gently through the snow. You feel the anticipation mountain men described. Waking stiff, stepping into frozen boots, tightening straps, and facing the unknown. The fire gives a final crackle. You scatter the coals gently, watching smoke rise in pale spirals as the flames fade into ash. Adjusting the buffalo robe, you take a final look at the place you slept, a humble circle of warmth carved from the storm. The memory of the night settles within you, gentle yet resilient, like a story waiting to be told. You turn toward the trail, feeling the snow shift beneath your boots. The forest breathes with you, calm and steady. Morning stretches across the mountains, crisp and bright. You step forward, carrying the quiet of the night. As you walk, the snow crunches softly beneath your boots. You glance back at the camp, peaceful now, untouched, though you feel the night's mark in your bones and breath. The mountains leave their impression on anyone who spends a night within them. Following a narrow path where snow is shallower, your steps echo lightly. Ahead, the world spreads in pale blues and whites. Behind, the clearing fades into memory. You think of mountain men who faced mornings like this. Every dawn required choices, each step forward essential. Journals note that selecting a campsite mattered as much as the journey itself. Surviving one freezing night did not guarantee the next. You continue along the trail, brushing frost from your robe. Between towering spruces, snow muffles your footsteps. Wind whispers through distant branches, snow slides from limbs, trunks creak in the morning chill. You inhale the scent of pine and cold earth, sharp and clear. Stopping at a fallen log, frost glimmers in the sunlight. You imagine a mountain man pausing to judge the day. Follow the river? Turn toward the ridge? Rebuild camp? In these mountains, even small choices carry weight. You climb a small rise overlooking a snow-blanketed valley. Rolling curves extend toward distant peaks glowing under the rising sun. Cold breeze brushes your face, carrying scents of water and changing weather. Boots sinking slightly in snow, you recall trappers judging the day by frost, bird calls, or air itself. One account notes a trapper believing the first morning sound foretold his fortune. At the valley floor, you pause again. Snow is untouched except for your trail. Frost glints like countless mirrors. You inhale deeply, letting the quiet settle. Cold remains, but daylight transforms it from enemy to stern companion. Glancing back toward the camp now hidden, you imagine mountain men doing the same, mindful of brief moments of warmth, aware of nights yet to come. Each dawn brought movement, each day a challenge. Adjusting your robe, you continue, snow shifting beneath your boots, wind humming through the branches. Mountains rise like ancient guardians. You feel part of the long line of travelers who learn to endure winter, step by step, night by night. Memory of the frozen bivouac lingers warmly behind, a quiet lesson from the night's cold embrace. Images rise unbidden, the fire glows brighter, the robe feels heavier, and a warm room flickers in your imagination. It is not real, yet it feels familiar, comforting. You open your eyes, smiling faintly. The dreamlike edge lingers, blending smoke and half-forgotten memories. Dreams kept spirits alive, softened solitude, and often provided the only warmth through the coldest nights. Slowly, you rise from the pine boughs, the buffalo robe sliding from your shoulders, leaving a lingering heat. The sky lightens to soft blue-gray, promising a clearer day yet edged with winter's sharpness. You stretch, joints cracking gently, and step from beneath the lean-to. Snow crunches underfoot, crisp with dawn. Your fire has dwindled to glowing coals, enough to warm your hands but not to fend off the cold. You kneel, feeding it twigs until the embers brighten and a thin flame rises. The warmth spreads slowly, familiar and welcome. Morning in the Rockies demanded swift action. Frontier journals note that at first light, trappers moved quickly, breaking camp, repacking sparse belongings, checking traps, preparing for long miles. Morning reclaimed the trail, comfort waited later. You echo that urgency, dusting snow from your robe, adjusting boots, taking stock. The lean-to stands as a lopsided triangle beneath the trees, dusted with fresh frost. Pine boughs beneath your bedding still bear your imprint. Heated stones lie scattered, now slowly reclaimed by snow. Everything around you bears the quiet traces of a night endured. You start gathering your scattered belongings, moving slowly but with purpose. The forest is still, broken only by a distant woodpecker tapping and the occasional groan of a snow-laden branch. You brush the hide of the lean-to with your glove, releasing a cloud of powdery snow. A small sense of gratitude rises for the simple shelter that shielded you from the storm's force. As you work, a detail from an old traveler's letter comes to mind. He wrote that the morning's silence made him feel as if the mountains themselves were watching his every move. He tried to pack quietly, he said, to avoid disturbing the ridges. Whether literal or poetic, scholars remain divided. Some see it as a reflection of winter's loneliness, others as a depiction of the calm and respect the wilderness inspires. You sense a trace of that calm now, moving carefully, your steps muffled by fresh snow. You return to the fire and add a slightly larger stick. The flame strengthens, sending warmth across the clearing. You pause to savor it briefly, then begin dismantling the lean-to, lifting the hide from its poles. Snow falls as you shake it clean. The scent of cold fir mingles with pine. You fold the hide methodically. The poles hit the snow with soft thuds as you dismantle the frame, stacking them neatly beside the nearest tree. Though you won't need them again, the tidiness feels right. Mountain men often did the same. Several journals note that trappers kept camps tidy, part habit, part superstition, believing a well-kept site might bring better fortune later. The reasoning, practical or symbolic, is still debated. You step back and survey the clearing. The camp now looks bare. Shelter dismantled, bedding flattened, fire reduced to faint embers. Without your night's boundaries, the world feels larger. The cold air brushes your face with clarity. You pull the robe around your shoulders, the fur warming quickly under your breath. One cooled stone from your bedding rests in your gloved hands. Its smooth surface retains the memory of the fire. Mountain men once kept certain stones, convinced they held warmth or luck. One account tells of a trapper carrying a favored stone for months. Practical comfort or superstition, it's unclear. Later readers interpret such habits with curiosity or amusement. You return the stone to the snow and rise. Thin beams of early sunlight filter through the trees, scattering across frost like rivers of light. You breathe deeply, letting the cold settle in your lungs. A final slow circle around the clearing ensures nothing is left behind. Your tracks from the night curve gently through the snow. You feel the anticipation mountain men described. Waking stiff, stepping into frozen boots, tightening straps, and facing the unknown. The fire gives a final crackle. You scatter the coals gently, watching smoke rise in pale spirals as the flames fade into ash. Adjusting the buffalo robe, you take a final look at the place you slept, a humble circle of warmth carved from the storm. The memory of the night settles within you, gentle yet resilient, like a story waiting to be told. You turn toward the trail, feeling the snow shift beneath your boots. The forest breathes with you, calm and steady. Morning stretches across the mountains, crisp and bright. You step forward, carrying the quiet of the night. As you walk, the snow crunches softly beneath your boots. You glance back at the camp, peaceful now, untouched, though you feel the night's mark in your bones and breath. The mountains leave their impression on anyone who spends a night within them. Following a narrow path where snow is shallower, your steps echo lightly. Ahead, the world spreads in pale blues and whites. Behind, the clearing fades into memory. You think of mountain men who faced mornings like this. Every dawn required choices, each step forward essential. Journals note that selecting a campsite mattered as much as the journey itself. Surviving one freezing night did not guarantee the next. You continue along the trail, brushing frost from your robe. Between towering spruces, snow muffles your footsteps. Wind whispers through distant branches, snow slides from limbs, trunks creak in the morning chill. You inhale the scent of pine and cold earth, sharp and clear. Stopping at a fallen log, frost glimmers in the sunlight. You imagine a mountain man pausing to judge the day. Follow the river? Turn toward the ridge? Rebuild camp? In these mountains, even small choices carry weight. You climb a small rise overlooking a snow-blanketed valley. Rolling curves extend toward distant peaks glowing under the rising sun. Cold breeze brushes your face, carrying scents of water and changing weather. Boots sinking slightly in snow, you recall trappers judging the day by frost, bird calls, or air itself. One account notes a trapper believing the first morning sound foretold his fortune. At the valley floor, you pause again. Snow is untouched except for your trail. Frost glints like countless mirrors. You inhale deeply, letting the quiet settle. Cold remains, but daylight transforms it from enemy to stern companion. Glancing back toward the camp now hidden, you imagine mountain men doing the same, mindful of brief moments of warmth, aware of nights yet to come. Each dawn brought movement, each day a challenge. Adjusting your robe, you continue, snow shifting beneath your boots, wind humming through the branches. Mountains rise like ancient guardians. You feel part of the long line of travelers who learn to endure winter, step by step, night by night. Memory of the frozen bivouac lingers warmly behind, a quiet lesson from the night's cold embrace.